Good evening. At this time, I'd like to call to order the Special Planning Commission meeting of August 26th, 2019. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Commissioner Bass?
Present.
Commissioner Cohan?
Here.
Commissioner Lanson?
Here.
Commissioner Newman?
Here.
Chair McMahon?
Here. Item number 4, are there any written comments, announcements, or continuances at this time?
Thank you, Chair. We did receive 2 late communication items, both related to item 7B on the agenda. They have been passed around the dais to all the commissioners present this evening.
Thank you. Public comments. Do we have any public comments at this time? Hang on. Okay, I thought I saw somebody coming up. Okay. Now is the time for public comment. At this time, any person may address the commission regarding a city planning matter that is not on this evening's agenda. Should the commission wish to discuss an issue raised by a member of the public, the issue will be referred to staff for scheduling on a future agenda. Anyone who would like to speak under public comments must complete a speaker card and file it with the recording secretary before the public comments portion of the agenda is called. The speaker's remarks should be addressed to the commission as a whole and not to an individual commissioner or staff member. Unless otherwise provided by the commission, speakers are limited to 5 minutes. The monitor in front of you will show you the remaining time that you have. Okay. All right. So item number 6. Next we have the consent calendar with the minutes of July 29th, 2019. Do any of my fellow commissioners have any comments or a motion to approve the minutes? Commissioner?
I'd like to go ahead and put forward a motion to go ahead and approve the minutes as written.
Thank you. Will the Secretary please prepare us for a vote?
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. All right. Item number 7. Will the clerk please open the public hearing?
Agenda item 7A, hearing having been advertised as required by law, is hereby open to consider agenda item 7A, new single-family dwelling, case number PPD 2017-70511, to allow demolition of an existing 3,868 square foot one-story home and for construction of a new 7,877 square foot two-story home, resulting in an increase of the total floor area by 204% of the previously existing dwelling located at 1231 La Granada Drive, and the applicant is DAF Trust.
Thank you. And presenting on behalf of staff is Associate Planner Will Chua. Mr. Chua?
Good evening, Chair McMahon, members of the Commission. For your consideration tonight is a request to demolish an existing single-family home and construct a new 2-story single-family dwelling, resulting in an increase of a total floor area of 204% of the original building. This application requires Planning Commission review because the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code requires that tear downs and rebuild exceeding 150% of the original size of the house requires Planning Commission approval. This is a map showing the vicinity map for the project location, and the asterisk represents the location of the property at 1231 La Granada Drive. This is to the west of that property is the 23 freeway. The main roads surrounding the project is Jans, Herbs, and Hillcrest Drive. This is an aerial showing the subject property, the 23 freeway to the west, the Conejo Creek Park to the west again, and as you can see, the rest of the area is pretty much a residential neighborhood. This is a front view of the property. There is an existing oak tree at the front yard. This next picture shows the house itself that will be demolished. And this is a picture of the second oak tree at the backyard of the property. This shows the back side of the house and the swimming pool. As a matter of background, the single-family home was constructed in 1958. It's a single story. Subsequent permits were issued for additions and the construction of the swimming pool. The single story home right now is at about 3868 square feet. On October 13, 2017, the subject application was filed by the applicant. The subject property is zoned RO, and the size of the lot is 28,700 square feet. This shows the site plan of the proposed site plan. The location of the proposed house is very similar to the location of the existing home. The driveway for this project would go around where the entry is going to be on the left side of the home. These are the two oak trees, one at the front and one at the rear. There will be retaining walls on the side of the property, double retaining walls at the rear to support the pad and the driveway. The first floor plan for the single-family home consists of a 3,100 square foot floor. The garage, the four-car garage with a tandem and storage area is another 1,600 square feet. The second floor of the building is about 990 square feet. This home features 5 bedrooms and 5.5 baths. This is the second floor of the proposed single family. The front elevation, this shows the front elevation of the property. It features a combination of craftsman and ranch style home. This combination has different architectural features like hip roofs, gable roofs, to break out the massing at the front side of the home. As you can see, there are hip roofs here, gable roof here, tower feature. So the architecture is pretty much is breaking up the massing for the two-story home. And the rear elevation looks similar as the front elevation with proper breakups, architectural features. This is the right side elevation, which is being approached on the existing driveway, right? Which is probably on the side of the existing driveway. And this is the left side where the garage entry will be. As far as grading is concerned, there will be a proposed cut of 2,282 cubic yards and 197 cubic yards of fill with a total of 2,085 export. That's about 150 truck trips. The grading is required to reduce the existing grade to comply with city standards. Currently, it's about 18%, so they will reduce that down to within city standards, which is a maximum of 15%. It will also allow the applicant to increase the pad area. there will be no natural slope greater than 25% that will be impacted because this area has been previously graded. The retaining walls that I showed you earlier ranges from a half foot to 5 feet with double walls at the rear and the sides. Compatibility with existing or surrounding properties. The existing residences in the area comprise of single and two-story home with varying architecture. It's predominantly ranch and craftsman style, but there are other architectures in that area as well. This is showing, comparing the proposed project to the surrounding properties with similar sizes. The next door neighbor of this property is 1261 La Granada at 25.8 floor to area ratio. The proposed project has 28%. Now, as far if you would notice that the rest of the comparables are single story, it's the average floor area ratio for this is about 22%, and the proposed project is at 20.5%. So it's pretty much comparable with the surrounding properties. The precise plan of design sets the guidelines for evaluating residential projects. This project is, like I said earlier, is located within mixed neighborhood of single and two-story homes. It has mass scale, roofline, and height consistent with other residences. The colors and materials for the proposed home are compatible with the natural and man-made surroundings. This table shows municipal code standards requirement. As far as this project is concerned, it meets or exceeds the requirement for minimum or maximum requirement as from the municipal code. This project consists of demolition and rebuilding of a single-family dwelling. This project is exempt from the provisions of CEQA as a Class 3 exemption, and which is a Class 3 exemption. Thank you. I'm sorry. This project is consistent with established architectural theme in the area. The dwelling is in character with the neighborhood, and the dwelling will not over-intensify the development of the subject lot. And with that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve or adopt the resolution approving PPD 2017-5011 based on the findings and subject to the conditions in the included in the draft resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chua. Are there any questions or comments, Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Chua, for your presentation. I just have a couple of quick questions about the conditions, specifically condition 17. This is on page 5 of attachment 4.
Yes, Commissioner.
This is just a typo. It currently reads, the advised is advised to obtain. I think we mean the applicant is advised. Yeah, it is. Okay. And then the only other thing I had was I did not see, and maybe I missed it, a condition requiring a signed acceptance of conditions. The signed up, yeah. Let me see. If it's not in there, it'll be added after the for the final resolution. Okay, thank you. That's all I have. I would ask that if commissioners do entertain a motion on this application, that we include not only the findings but the modified conditions on these 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chua, for your report. Did you receive any comments from neighbors or anybody in the community with regard to the application besides the applicant?
No, I have not.
Aside from the typo that Commissioner Newman found, I also wanted to kind of clarify one other issue. and that is for the purpose of the neighbors. There is an indication in Note 10 that dust will be minimized. Could you kind of tell everybody exactly how the dust is supposed to be minimized as part of this project?
Okay. One of them is spraying the property with water during windy conditions.
Okay. One thing also, we didn't get a chance to go onto the property because it was fenced off. My understanding is the pool is going to be filled in, correct?
Yes, the pool would be filled in
With what?
with dirt.
And again, since we didn't get a chance to see, is there any grading issues or any problems with the backyard where the fill would actually have to be compacted in some way?
Not that I'm aware of. This grading plan was reviewed by the Public Works Department, and they don't have issues with it.
Okay, and the other reason I asked about actual community input is that the hours look like it's 7 o'clock a.m. Monday through Saturday. I understand the weekdays. I didn't know if somebody had a concern with regard to 7 o'clock on a Saturday, but you didn't receive any comments about that?
No.
All right, thank you. Nothing further.
Are there any other questions, commissioners? Okay. At this point, we ask for the applicant or their representative to speak. You have 15 minutes, and please come and state your name and city of residence for the record.
Hi, I'm Brian Lerman, one of the principals at Arc Design Group. We're the architectural firm representing the project and the owner. Resident of Simi Valley and office in Thousand Oaks, so we feel like we're at home. Thank you this evening. Thank you, Will, for your work. And we've been working with Mr. Chua over the last, 2 months, modifying the project to meet with all the standards that he has shared with you this evening. A lot of that had to do with the site, because the site is an older site with an older home and has some challenges because of the steep driveway, the oak trees that we're trying to respect and design with regard to bringing the house up to date and meeting current standards for an estate home, but also recognizing the challenges on any of the properties in Thousand Oaks. So as you can see through the report and what was proposed, we're not challenging the oak trees in any way. We're working with them. We've sculpted the driveway around it, worked really close with a civil engineer to get our 18% or 18.5% driveway back down to 15%, so we don't have any challenges with our fire department and current standards. We did also work closely with the homeowner to meet their requests, and this probably is a little helpful versus the 2D black and white, where you can see very traditional, which would fit into the neighborhood beautifully. We did, with Mr. Chua's support, modify the house, pushing back the second floor, creating a lot of one-story elements so that it had a softened approach. Obviously, we have a lot of windows. It's a beautiful site with a nice view, so we're trying to take advantage of that. As to the grading, because I know that was brought up and mentioned in regard to the backyard, there will be removal and recompaction, just like any new house that would be built, just based upon a house that's that old. Once you remove it, our soils consultant will be recommending doing either 2 to 5 feet of removal and recompaction just to build a new house. That would be across the board on almost any site within the city. A lot of the quantity of dirt also is being used to fill in that pool, and it will be dirt that's filled and then compacted. That's part of the yardage that was brought up this evening. And then other than that, just pleased to be here, and hopefully you like what we designed, and here to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Commissioner?
I just had a quick question, Mr. Lehman. Thank you for going through the project. How are you? I know you're filling in the pool with some of the dirt. Are you also removing a certain amount of cubic feet of dirt as well?
To the back, we have to remove the dirt because the pad has to come down to create the driveway. That's the only way we could get the driveway slope without impacting more of the tree. We're coming up and around this big tree, and then we can't grade in that whole zone, so we actually have to work with the grades to lower it to get to the pad.
And believe me, I appreciate the effort you're taking to try to make sure to preserve the trees and go around that way. The removal of the dirt, Truckloads. Any idea how many truckloads we're talking?
I think it was mentioned that there's 150.
And are those trucks going to be parking on the street? What's the plan in terms of how that's going to be done?
That's a question I can't answer. That's going to be coordinated with the grading contractor. I'm not sure how Public Works manages like a truck route for where usually they stage it off-site and then they call them. I rarely see, and we've done a number of projects in the city of Thousand Oaks with grading and in other communities where they're parked on the neighborhood street. There's plenty of public zone and around the corner where the community, the traffic center, and the fields are, where they can call them as needed. But I don't have an answer for that other than just experience and what I've seen in other communities and Thousand Oaks.
Okay, we'll have staff follow up on that question later. Thank you. Nothing further.
Anyone else? Okay, and so it was brought up that there was item number 17 was a small correction, and also that you haven't yet signed the conditions, the acceptance of conditions.
We didn't actually physically get the conditions yet.
So
we discussed them back and forth, and there were items that we addressed, but the final conditions that you're talking about tonight, we didn't see the final conditions, which they represent everything we've talked about.
Okay. So Mr. Chua.
If I may, if the commission takes action to approve the project, the conditions will become final at that time. The applicant would be required to accept those conditions if that condition is added by the commission as part of their motion, in which case he would be bound by those and all future owners of the property.
And that's no problem.
And Chair, if I may, for the one condition, although we are going to go through those conditions apparently with the applicant, the condition would be, I think Commissioner Newman was talking about the signed acceptance of conditions. And that condition, sir, just reads basically a signed acceptance of the conditions executed by the applicant and property owner or his or her duly authorized representative shall be returned to the Community Development Department prior to the issuance of a zone clearance, grading, and building permits. So basically what that means, sir, is that you would be acknowledging once you accept these conditions, you're agreeing to those conditions.
Yeah, that is not a problem. This is not the first time we've addressed accepted conditions.
Understood.
So yeah,
just making the record because
I appreciate that. Yeah, and
so
for the
again, you're going to be looking at the conditions, and the plan would be that the commission would approve if whatever your decision is going to be on this project. That if it is approval, the conditions will be presented to the applicant. If there's any changes, we will address them at that point.
Okay. Do we have any more questions? Okay.
Thank you.
And now we will go to public comments. You will need to fill out a speaker card if you would like to say something about the project under consideration. At this point, we do not have any public speakers. Did anybody intend to fill out a speaker card and speak? Okay. Are there any follow-up comments from staff?
Yes, Chair McMahon, Engineer Brad Bussell here would probably try to clarify some questions that came up about grading.
Good evening, Commissioners. Yeah, we did look at that as far as the staging for the trucks, because 150 truck trips is quite a few for that neighborhood. And the street is quite narrow in that area. There's really not a lot of room for parking on the street there. And we did look, if you go around the corner of La Granada, there is a little bit of area there where a few trucks could stage, but it's not going to be a lot of area there for a lot of significant amount of trucks to stage, so they're going to have to limit the amount of grading they're hauling they're going to do. As far as the haul route, we don't really determine a haul route until they do grade, until they start grading, because you just don't know where the dirt's going to go. You've got a construction project on the other side of the freeway. The park project's going in. They could possibly use some dirt if it all works out with the timing is correct. But that's about it for the haul route.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay. The applicant does have an additional 5 minutes if they choose. please state your name and city of residence.
Hi, I'm Lucinda Pelagian, and I just wanted to say I've been a resident of Thousand Oaks for 20 years now, and very dedicated to the city. We love it here, and we're just very excited to be able to build this beautiful home. And we've been in that neighborhood all these 20 years, so we just hope that everybody appreciates what we're trying to do and make it nice and beautiful and fit in with everything else there, and that's all I have to say. Any questions?
Any questions? All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I think it's time to close the public hearing. Okay. And I will open up the floor to a motion or a discussion. Commissioners?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to go ahead and move that we adopt resolution approving PPD 2017-70511 based on the findings and conditions as modified. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any comments on the motion, Commissioner?
Just quickly, we do appreciate all you've done to make an actual beautiful project, and we actually, I think, are all very happy about how much you've tried to make sure it blends in with the process and saving the trees. So I'm in favor of the motion, and thank you for doing such a great project.
Anyone else, Commissioners? Okay, at this point, will the Secretary please prepare us for a vote?
Motion carries 5-0.
All right, and I'm required to read this. Any aggrieved party who wishes to appeal the Planning Commission's decision may do so by filing an appeal with the Community Development Department within 10 days. Thank you. All right, at this time, I think we're ready for item 7B. Will the clerk please open the public hearing?
Item 7B, hearing, having been advertised as required by law, is hereby open to consider Agenda Item 7B, case numbers SUP 2014-70291 and LTP 2015-70174 to allow encroachment within the protected zones of 3 landmark trees and installation of a wireless communications facility at an existing water tank facility located in a residential area. Location is 4588 Sunny Hill Street, and the applicant is Verizon Wireless.
Okay. At this time, presenting on behalf of staff is Associate Planner Will Chua.
Good evening, Chair McMahon, Planning Commissioners. For your consideration tonight, as mentioned earlier, is to allow encroachment within the protected zones of 3 landmark trees and an installation of wireless communications facility at an existing water tank site. The project is located on the northern portion of the North Ranch neighborhood. Here's an aerial of the project site. It is surrounded by residential homes. Another water tank facility owned by the same company, CalAm, is located on the west side on Heritage Place. This facility is much lower than the existing water facility, than the project site, and it's much lower than Heritage Place. This is a view looking west towards the facility driveway. The water tank facility is sunk into the ground, so the installation of antennas on the face of the water tank is not feasible. This is the approximate location of the antenna sectors on the southeast sector of the property, which is around this area here. And this is a view looking northeast and the approximate location of the antennas on the southeast sector will be on this side. The Thousand Oaks Municipal Code requires approval of a special use permit by the Planning Commission for a wireless communications facility within a residential zone. As a matter of background, the project site was improved in the late 1980s with a water tank with wrought iron fencing and equipment enclosure located by the driveway entry. On June 23, 2014, the applicant filed for a special use permit for the construction of a wireless communications facility. During the initial review period, staff made a determination that the 3 of the landmark trees will be impacted by underground conduits for the facility. In April of the next year, in 2015, the applicant filed the landmark tree permit. The special use permit is intended to evaluate the appropriateness of certain uses within certain areas. Through a special use permit process, negative impacts are eliminated or minimized. For a wireless communications facility application, the FCC limits local government authority. Dr. Jonathan Kramer will discuss that issue after staff's presentation. The city's wireless resolution 97197 sets the guidelines and standards in evaluating wireless facilities in the city. The most important role of this resolution is to evaluate the aesthetic impacts of proposed wireless sites. The picture you're seeing on your screen at this time is the before and after propagation maps for the facility. The picture to the left is the existing signal coverage that Verizon has in the area. The white spots are, the red circled area shows the intended area of coverage by Verizon. As you can see from the pictures on the left and the right side, the intended area of coverage has barely signal in it. It has low levels of service. After installation, it will be provided with a good signal coverage. And the signal coverage, by the way, is for Verizon customers only. The proposed facility will have 3 sectors with 3 antennas each, and each sector is located on the north, southeast, and southwest side of the water facility, as I've shown you in the picture earlier. 2 of the antennas for each sector will be installed at 14-foot tip height. Another 2 on its sides would be installed at 12-foot high. The the existing fence adjacent to the 12-foot high antennas would be raised as well to provide visual what do you call that? Visual blockage. Thank you. The equipment cabinets and an emergency generator will be installed within the existing enclosure. The applicant submitted a noise study that indicates that the noise coming from the generator will comply with the city's noise level for residential areas of 55 decibels. This site plan shows the location of the antenna installation. This would be the north sector. This will be the southwest sector and southeast sector on the other side. And the equipment cabinet at the front along next to the driveway. The oak trees, the affected landmark trees are along the front of the property. The telecommunication lines would be coming from the front on Sunny Hill, and the power lines would be coming from the left side of the driveway. This is an elevation plan showing the typical installation for each of the antenna sectors. These dark areas here are the antennas, 1, 2, 3, and 4. The two of the antennas, as I mentioned earlier, would be installed at 14-foot tip height. The other two would be at 12, and the antennas would be raised on that side for visual continuity. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back to that slide now. This is a view of the existing equipment enclosure. As you can see from the proposed, the equipment cabinet would be fully enclosed and blocked from. There will be it won't be visible from the outside of the enclosure. This is another view of the property looking southeast. This is the typical installation. This would be the installation on the southeast side of the property. And here's the other side, southwest. As far as project visibility, the city's resolution 97197 requires antennas to be affixed to existing structures that may be utility poles, light standards, street lights, or other existing structures like buildings or water tanks. As far as affixing to the existing structure, the antennas comply with this requirement of 97197. Alternative site analysis. In residential zones, alternate sites are very limited. They could only be placed in churches or church towers, playfield lights, or street lights. This part of North Ranch has limited number of street lights. The project site has the elevation and existing structure to support the antennas for coverage, and the equipment cabinet and the generator. The applicant considered two other sites within the North Ranch area. One of them is a street tree located on Vista Ridge, and another location was considered on Summit View. The first alternate site was eliminated due to the lack of location in the public right-of-way for underground vault installation. As far as the other site is concerned, it was eliminated because of the lack of owner interest. The technical review was made by the city's RF consultant, which he will discuss later. The proposal complies with FCC guidelines, and required fencing will be installed after project completion and testing to ensure accurate location. The applicant submitted a tree report with suggestions on preventive measures, which include requirement to have the presence of the applicant's tree consultant for work within the protected zones of the sycamore trees, installation of temporary protective fencing, using of boring tools only, routing or pre-planning of the underground utilities to avoid as much as possible the trees, and above ground installations of the equipment cabinets. The city's consultant evaluated the landmark tree permits or report submitted by the applicant and agrees with the applicant's evaluation with the implemented preventive measures. This project is exempt from CEQA under Class 1, minor alteration to an existing facility, and Section 15304, Class 4, minor alterations to the conditions of the land. And with that, I turn over the presentation to Mr. Jonathan Kramer.
Good evening, Chair and Council and Commissioners, Dr. Jonathan Kramer. As I have for the last 32 some odd years, I've reviewed virtually every wireless project that comes before the city for design elements and compliance with RF safety rules. This project is a little bit different from the types of projects we normally have presented to us in the sense that this is a low to the ground site. So the FCC requires the applicant, and here the licensee as well, Verizon, to take very specific steps to exclude the public from that area which exceeds the general population limit. That's the limit where we can be exposed 24/7 under the FCC rules. There will be a portion of each sector in front of the sectors that will exceed that amount. So what the applicant has done is gone through with its RF engineers and calculated what they believe to be the correct zone that has to be enclosed within fencing. In your proposed conditions of approval tonight, starting at, I believe, condition number, 7 and 8, are conditions that I helped to craft that will require that Verizon, before turning on the site unattended, demonstrate to the city that they've placed the barriers in the correct location so that all of their signals that exceed the general population limit are contained within an enclosed area. That's what the federal regulations require. What we've added here are conditions that allow them to build the site, but they can't operate it until they actually build the fencing, and they can't do that until after they demonstrate to the city that the fencing will be in the right location. So this is an unusual process for the city in that most of the time we don't have sites like this. That's why you see these particular conditions tonight. If the applicant agrees to the process specifically in condition number 8, and I would ask you to specifically ask the applicant for that, then the project will demonstrate plan compliance with the FCC rules, and that will then eliminate from your consideration RF safety as an issue. It doesn't eliminate anything else, but it will remove RF safety because they will have demonstrated plan compliance with the FCC rules. So this is a project that's been kicking around for a number of years. It's gone through a number of iterations and has improved over the years in terms of its design itself, and now demonstrates, subject to the conditions, plan compliance with the FCC rules. That's what I have for right now. Of course, when you're ready, I'll have answers to any questions you have.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to finish.
That's
Sorry,
excellent.
Chair.
Excellent.
Okay, as far as public communications is concerned, staff has received some emails and letters from the residents in the neighborhood supporting the project, and also the North Ranch Homeowners Association. And in conclusion, the project is consistent with the general plan, the municipal code, and Resolution 97-197. It complies with all applicable laws, regulations, and policies. It will not be detrimental to public health, safety, or general welfare. It's exempt under CEQA, as mentioned earlier, and will be compatible with the surrounding land uses. And with that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution approving SUP 2014-70291, LTP 2015-70174, based on the findings and subject to the conditions included in the attached resolutions to this staff report. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of staff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Chua, again, thank you for this presentation, and Dr. Kramer. Before I begin, I should disclose to the Commission, to the public, that I've had an ex parte communication regarding this case. I had a brief text message exchange with a friend who lives nearby to the application site, just essentially saying, hey, heads up, there's going to be a hearing on such and such date about this case. We did not discuss the merits of the case. I don't think either my friend or I gained any advantage or any information that was not available to the public, and I don't think this exchange in any way affected my judgment, pro or con, about the case. But in an abundance of caution, I think it is prudent to disclose that I had this communication. So with that, Dr. Kramer, we've gone through this before, but perhaps not everyone in attendance tonight, and I count close to 40 people here, may not be familiar with what criteria are inbounds and out of bounds for us as a commission when we're evaluating wireless cell tower cases. So we consider things in several different buckets: aesthetics, compatibility with existing and adjoining uses, and health and safety. If you could briefly walk us through what criteria we can use in considering this case, and what criteria are out of scope for this commission to use. Thank you.
It's probably easier to talk about what is out of bounds, because that's the primary subject that normally is kicked around here, and that's radio frequency emissions safety. You're in the aesthetics business. Under federal law, under state law, your job is to look at the aesthetics of a project and make a determination regarding it. Now, also under federal law and state law, you're allowed to inquire whether a particular project complies with the federal regulations for RF safety. Here's the limitation. Once a determination has been made that the project can actually comply or will, talk closer to the mic. And here I thought I was broadcasting my voice out without even the need for the microphone. So once a project displays plan compliance with the FCC rules, that ends that part of your debate. Now, we talk about plan compliance because the site isn't built. So the beginning portion of a project like this is the technical evaluation of the plans. And that goes to looking at the types of antennas used, the amount of power transmitted, the frequencies that are involved, and all of those go into an FCC calculation that helps us as engineers determine plan compliance. Again, I talked about this as being an unusual project, and it is for the city because this isn't one where it's just clearly compliant. So that's why this city, more than most, goes through a very elaborate process of determining whether a project can comply with the FCC rules under the methods allowed by the FCC. And in this case, that's why I provided specific conditions as to RF safety. Again, if the applicant accepts those conditions, they will demonstrate plan compliance, and that will be the end of your exploration of it. At the local level, we're not allowed to set standards or even adopt the federal standards. Our issue is simply determining compliance with the FCC rules. So pretty much to finish up, the answer is, what do you have? You have a lot. You have how it looks. But presuming that the applicant accepts the conditions regarding RF safety testing, that will be off the table. Does that provide you a good enough answer for what you're looking for?
It does. Thank you. I want to be sure I understand it, though. So
okay.
just to follow up and read back to you what I heard you say, because you've covered quite a lot of ground here. Reviewing compliance with the FCC standards regarding building the cell tower, that is in scope, correct?
That is in scope.
Right. Making any kind of determination with regard to health or safety of wireless in general or this specific project is out of scope, correct?
It's out of scope. Your simple question is, does it comply or does it not comply?
Right. But again, the question I'm posing is specifically with regard to health and safety. My understanding from what you said is that the FCC sets health and safety standards, and we can determine whether or not this project meets those standards.
You have that correct.
But we cannot go off on our own and make determinations as to health or safety of wireless technology in general or this project in particular. Is that correct?
As you described it earlier, that is out of bounds.
Right. Okay. That's what I wanted to clear up. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have nothing further. Thank you.
Are there any other questions, Commissioner?
Thank you, Mr. Chua and Dr. Kramer. I want to first clarify something, make sure I have this clear. So this project, would it be deemed a 4G or 5G project?
This is a 4G project that at some point in the future probably will be upgraded to 5G.
So in what way would it be upgraded?
The deployment of 5G doesn't mean a lot of new equipment, but it means swapping out transmitters, sometimes panels, although at this particular project that would surprise me. I think the applicant can better answer the question, but this is a 4G site. There's no 5G, to my knowledge, anywhere in Ventura County or even anywhere closer than downtown LA. So this is to serve the current users with the expectation that it will be upgraded in the future.
And are either of you aware of any 5G applications that actually have been submitted to the city so far by any telecommunication company?
Not as far as the staff is concerned. There's no application for 5G at this point.
You had a discussion with Commissioner Newman with regard to being out of bounds, and I want to make sure that we're all clear exactly what that means. If we were to take on an issue that is out of bounds, what would we be in violation of?
Well, you would make the city attorney very unhappy because you would be getting into an area where we are not allowed to base decisions. And to the extent that you have discussions about that, and hypothetically, you later determine that the project was not going to go forward, even though it may not be based on RF concerns, it pollutes the record.
Okay, but I'm assuming there's a constitutional provision called the Supremacy Clause. I'm assuming that would be applicable.
Well, it's not even that. It would lead to a potential claim that your decision was based on out-of-bounds considerations of RF safety.
And if concerned citizens are worried about the health effects, and I don't know if we've ever actually talked about this, where should they be going to raise those issues?
This is an area that is solely controlled by Congress and the FCC. A couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I believe, the chairman of the FCC said that he's going to be bringing forward an item at the next hearing in September, commission hearing, that will effectively maintain the FCC rules that have been in place, that they're not going to make changes to that, but they're going to make changes to some of the ways that the rules are applied. That's the forum because we have no authority at the local or state level. This is completely federal. So to the extent that there are questions, Congress and the commission are the venues.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Are there any other questions of staff? Okay. At this point, we'll ask the applicant to come forward to the podium. State your name and city of residence for the record, and you have 15 minutes.
Hi, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, staff. My name is John Halminski. I'm here on behalf of Verizon Wireless. My employer is SmartLink LLC. The address is 3300 Irvine Avenue, Newport Beach, California. I have read the staff report presented to me that the Commission has in front of them tonight, and I do agree to all the conditions as set forth by staff. I just wanted to go over a few things, just housekeeping items that took place over the period of the last few years. As staff mentioned, we did, I personally attended met with Westlake North POA and spoke to them regarding the project, and they took it to their board meeting and wrote a letter to the city stating that they're in support of the project. They're obviously a advisory board level to the city, but that they did review that. And then in addition to that, on 3/16/2018, the previous planner, who's no longer with the city, advised me to send out a public notice, basically a mailer, to all the residents within the radius that was also radius for this Planning Commission meeting. Just explain to them what we're proposing to do, what we plan to bring to the city in advance of the Planning Commission. It's kind of an outreach letter. And after sending out the outreach letter, and in the outreach letter, I stated my name, my telephone number and email, and a general brief description of the project, along with a set of 11 by 17 plans and photo simulations. So they actually got the actual packet that you have tonight that are in the exhibits. After receiving that letter, I did only receive one response from a gentleman at 4571 Sunny Hill, which is directly across the street. It's kind of right where the entrance is to the water facility, directly across from that driveway entrance. I met with him, came out here, met with him at the site. He had a few concerns regarding just public access, which I think we addressed in terms of barriers. And he seemed genuinely accepting to that. We had a very good conversation. We were there for about a half an hour. We walked the entire project, and I reached out to him and followed up, said if there's any other questions you might have in the future. I didn't have a hearing date, but if you did, then please come to me. And I have not heard back from that gentleman. So with that, I think that staff and Dr. Kramer explained to the commission tonight in their staff report the parameters of your approval and authority. And if you have any other questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Do we have any, Commissioner?
You said that you got an endorsement from the North Ranch Property Owners Association. When was that?
The letter that was sent to the city was dated January 17th, 2018. And it's the Westlake North POA. I believe it's in the staff report.
It is in our packet. Yeah. Are there any other questions, Commissioner?
Hey. That's correct. Not at this time. 4G is the technology that this site will launch with. Basically, anything that you would be able to access via the internet or via your cell phone, which would be text messaging, live downstreaming, voice, data. So it's basically in voice and data technology. Correct. It's all fed via fiber to the equipment, which is all the fiber in the city up in that area is underground. So. We don't have, Verizon has explained to us, we don't have a definitive date as to when 5G will potentially launch. It could be within the next 2 to 3 years, but that's just a discussion I had with Verizon's engineering department. So we don't know exactly, but at which time, we had a case come forward to the hearing officer 10 days ago on another case, and the same thing was discussed. And I believe we amended some of the conditions to kind of address any future modifications to the cell site. We were happy with that because, in general, we come to the city, back to the city, let's say 2-3 years from now, for any modifications to a cell site because we need building permits for certain things. And so in that, we would come back to the city for any type of review for future development on the project.
All right. But again, as envisioned this evening, we're talking about primarily or exclusively a 4G service from this site, correct?
Yes.
Right. The final question I have, and I'm not sure you can answer this, is my understanding is that Verizon is not the landowner here. It's Cal Water or someone else, is in walking the site, I noticed this is a water tank, but around the perimeter of the water tank, there's an irrigation line. What's up with that?
Any above ground irrigation lines that are
Yes.
drip lines?
Yes.
They're irrigating the downslopes, I would imagine, for erosion control. Whether it's ice plant or any other type of plant that's planted, you have to irrigate it for a certain amount of years or it will die. So it's got to root themselves, and then the irrigation can be tapered off depending on what type of species that plant is. Whether those irrigation lines are currently in operation, I don't know. That's something the water district
Yeah, they
manages.
appear to be functional. I haven't seen that before. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions of the applicant? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. At this point, we will go to public comments. You'll need to fill out a speaker card. I have 17 right now. Each speaker will have 2 minutes because we have 17. Please state the name and city of residence for the record. And I will call you up. I'll name 2 names, and then one person will be kind of waiting and ready to go. The first one is Mark Sellers, and then will be Kathy Schutz.
My name is Mark Sellers. I'm with the Jackson Titus Law Firm and a resident of Thousand Oaks, and I was asked to be here tonight by a group of neighboring homeowners who are very opposed to this proposed placement of 108 antenna sites 90 feet from their homes. So that's the driver here. I think that's important that we take a look at this site. I don't know whether you can see that. Your aerial was far better. The point is that this site is surrounded by homes on all sides. Staff in their staff report indicated, hey, we've done this before. We put these cell sites around water tanks. And they gave 2 addresses. One is on Harwick, which is in my neighborhood. And if you look at that water tank in the nearest residence, it's 708 feet away. Not 90 feet, 708 feet away. The other site in Dos Vientos, the nearest home to that water tank and antenna farm is 780 feet away. Again, we're talking about 90 feet here. And I think that's why you have so many people out here tonight. This is what I call a better site. This is a water tank on the north side of north of Canaan Road, Westlake Boulevard. It's by a house where I used to represent the owner, been up there many times, wanted to put a helipad up there. But this is a water tank that's over 1,000 feet from the nearest home. And it looks back onto North Ranch area. And to me, I'm not an engineer, but to me, I would think, oh, it's a line of sight issue. You can get coverage of most of this area that's deficient in coverage. What I'm asking this commission to do is basically ask or have an independent analysis of alternative sites prepared, rather than taking the applicant's word, which is a conflict, and say, oh, we went here, went there, and nobody was interested. This would be something that I think would help in your finding the least intrusive way to get coverage in this area, not the most intrusive.
Thank you. I'm afraid your time is up.
Well, can I just conclude? I feel this is a market value issue. It's not a health issue. I'm not going to argue health. I don't know. We have people here who are far better at that. There are studies out there that say if you're across the street from one of these sites, your home is going to lose 20% in value. That's a legitimate land use decision for you to make and consider. Maybe this isn't the appropriate site for such an impact.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I really want quiet and respect for all the speakers. We have Kathy Schutz, and after that, Michael Kahn.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. I'm here this evening speaking as the president of the Westlake North Property Owners Association, which was referred to several times this evening. Way back in December of 2017, John Helminski met with 2 of our board members regarding this site, told us all about it. And in January of 2018, as he said, we did write a letter supporting the project as many people in the community have been wanting a new cell site, so we get reception. And that letter is an attachment number 6. Now, I understand there are people here this evening who are not in favor of the project, but as a board, we have not heard from any of those people, and we have not heard of any concerns from those people. We have, however, heard from a lot of people who do want the cell service and who have come to us to ask us to help with with getting the cell service. So we have not heard anything negative about it up till now. As noted in your staff report, the North Ranch area has always received very poor or no cell service at all. And with this new facility in place, we feel that this would be a great improvement for all of our members and all the North Ranch area. And we urge you to vote yes on this project so that all residents can enjoy good cell service, finally. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Kahn, and then after that, Timothy Walsh.
Good evening. My name is Michael Kahn. I live on Heritage, and if I walk out my front door or in my backyard, I'll be able to see the new cell towers. Now, I sat through here for a half an hour listening about preserving oak trees, and then I find out about this hearing last night when someone comes, knocks on their door and said, "Are you aware?" We never had notice of this, and I think a lot of people never objected because it somehow got railroaded through, and then my kids found out about it. They go online, and as you pointed out, 5G is a lot stronger than 4G. This is only for 4G. It's affecting their house, their health. They're concerned about it. Our house, we built like the Four Seasons in the backyard. There's waterfalls, 3 fountains, 3 outdoor TVs, an outdoor den. We entertain a lot. We live outside. My wife now is afraid to go out there and go out in the sun because from our backyard, we're going to see these towers. I think that there's a notice that's going to go in there, radio frequency radiation. If I go sell my house as a lawyer, I have to disclose this fact. Who's going to buy a house when they know that there's radio frequency radiation there? I think that these experts come in here and they get paid to say what they want, and I can get experts to show that it will affect our health. And I'm concerned that this thing is getting railroaded really quickly through. I had a situation with Ed Ball where he wanted to put an RV place and they wanted to put a dump site in there. And they were afraid of the smell. They spent 12 hours in the hearing in Simi Valley, and they finally, for a dump site, didn't approve it because they thought it would affect their health. Well, a tower overlooking everyone's home and that close, I believe is going to affect their house, their health, and their value. And I'd like to see them have a tower right next to everyone's home and see how they feel about it. I think it's despicable to, without going through a feasibility study to see if there's other alternatives. There's a lot of hills around, but this may be the cheapest way to do it. And certainly, if it does go through, everyone's going to petition to reduce their taxes because it's crazy. Who's going to buy a house with 5G antennas overlooking their property? So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk, but I think something else should be done or other alternatives should be looked at.
Timothy Walsh, and then James Lynn.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Timothy Walsh. I live at 4516 Sunny Hill, next door to the water tank. I never received an outreach from anyone. The first I learned about this project was a sign being posted a few weeks ago on the site itself. And I was never contacted by the Homeowners Association or anyone from the Homeowners Association about this, even though it's been apparently being discussed for years. First of all, no one has a problem with cell phones in North Ranch. Maybe Verizon you do, but you can get AT&T, you can get T-Mobile. There's plenty of options for you to use your cell phone in North Ranch. I drive through it every day. I've lived there for 20 years. The area is not growing. It's not like there's going to be a bunch of houses built in North Ranch. It's done. The plan is done. There's not going to be additional people served by this site. And the aesthetics is going to be a real problem. The site, once developed, is like a Trojan horse. Once one cell phone carrier comes in, other carriers now have access to build additional equipment there. And there's a rule where if they want to extend poles up to 20 feet over the 14 feet that's already proposed, they can do it without additional approvals. So now you're talking about a 36-foot pole, maybe many more. The aesthetics is going to be horrible. It's a view of an open ridge shared by the neighborhood, and it's going to definitely affect property values because it's going to be ugly. It's this industrial facility in the middle of North Ranch. It's ridiculous. The second point I want to make is that it's not the least intrusive means, meaning that there are other sites with homes much farther away, up in the hills above Canaan, also water tanks with electrical and roads and access. These really need to be considered. And I also believe that an environmental impact study needs to be considered. And the point about 5G is valid too. We don't know what the effects of that are. No one can prove to us that that's safe.
Thank you. James Lynn, and then Georgianne Yeomans.
Hello, my name is James Lynn. I'm a physician, and I live adjacent to the water reservoir. So I'm like 50 feet away from those proposed towers. And so just a side note, I've never lost coverage up there. I have no problems with the internet up there. And so, I mean, looking into this, I mean, I have 2 young kids, I have a wife, and you have to look at the data of the radio frequency radiation. The data does show a higher incidence of symptoms. It can vary from mild to moderate to severe. It can go from memory loss, fatigue, drowsiness, to cancer. And the initiative report, a bioinitiative report in 2012 has shown, and they did a retrospective study, and they showed that in 1,800 studies that there is effects on the DNA chromosomal changes, and also neurotoxicity and carcinogenic properties to animals and humans. And so given that there is strong data and support that the radio frequency radiation can cause damage to people, I mean, I live 50 feet away from there. Our bedrooms will be right there. There is, a high probability. There's nothing in medicine is a given, but there is strong support that the radio frequency radiation can cause damage. So I think, I didn't know that this was going to happen. I just found out a week ago that this hearing was going to occur, and that I think more should be looked into the effects of these cell towers in the area. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Excuse me. Please, let's not clap. There may be some people with other views that will feel uncomfortable. Georgianne Yeomans, and then Tommy Tchatian. I'm sorry about that.
Good evening. My name is Georgianne Yeomans. Hello, everyone. I'm here in favor of the cell tower site. I think that we've gone from a situation.
You need to state your city of residence.
I'm a Thousand Oaks resident. I've lived in this area for 31 years. I think we've gone from a situation where not having cell phone service is a nuisance to it being a necessity. It came very close to home to me It's not a luxury anymore. It's a necessity. In our family, we have medical devices that communicate through a wireless signal. My husband had a medical emergency. My kids couldn't reach me for 25 minutes because I was on a walk in our neighborhood and there is no cell service. People didn't receive notices of evacuation during the fires on their cell phones because they don't have cell phone service in our area. And I think that it's a circumstance in which it needs to be rectified. We need to have cell phone service. It's not just a luxury, it's a necessity. Even as you come out down Westlake Boulevard and turn right on Valley Spring on a daily basis, you'll see cars lined up, parked because they can't continue their phone calls unless they stop there. So I'm not an engineer, I'm not a doctor, I don't know about the health and welfare effects, but the point is that we need to take into account the welfare of everyone affected and not just a few that are affected by this project. So I'm in favor of increasing our self-service so that we do have the ability to communicate with medical professionals, with emergency responders, with services. It's a necessity. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Let's see. Tommy, and I'm so sorry about Tichikian.
Chajayan.
Thank you. And then Greg Chajayan.
Good evening. I live at 4571 Sunny Hill Street in Thousand Oaks and learned about the plans by Verizon to build a new mobile base station at the Water Reserve site, Candle Crest. This planned site is very close to our house, approximately 100 feet. We live directly across from this site, and we definitely object this project for many reasons. Mobile coverage in the area is good. We have no problem, and therefore a new base station is not necessary. There is no new building planned and no population growth in this neighborhood. Therefore, no new base station for growth is necessary. Proximity of mobile base station so close to many houses is highly intrusive and a major health risk, and not necessary as other sites are available without such major issues and risks. Other reasons like environmental impacts, violation of quiet environment, and bad aesthetics will lead to unnecessary traffic and disturbance and also will reduce the property values. We request an environmental study to ensure the beautiful nature around our community and is not impacted. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg Tachizian, and then Judy Bruce.
Where's it project? Is this project somewhere? Where? My name is Greg Tajayan. I am the gentleman that was spoken to by the Verizon applicant, and I did not approve this project. As Dr. Kramer pointed out, this is not a compliant project for several reasons. I'm a physician in the area. My image is not showing, please. I've lived in this area for 20 years, serving this community. And magnetic radiation is truly a condition. It's a diagnosable code in our ICD-10, which is a specific number that we use for diagnoses. People have sensitivities to magnetic radiation like that. I've done a study, which I included here. There's 114 literature-reviewed studies that show that there is truly reactions to EMF by people, and there's different sensitivities for people. As a result, for me, being a physician, I'm exposed to gamma radiation, X-ray. My sensitivity is much less. So I live 100 feet from this, so my sensitivity to the radiation will be different than the general population. That's a very important point to remember. Who is the medical person who is giving advice to the community about this project? We need somebody who has a medical knowledge about EMF sensitivity. The other problem is, my image is not showing. Okay. This site, the landowner, is not responsible. People frequent this site all the time, and you see that there's people recreationally using this area to do things that they shouldn't be doing, as well as looking at the view. And the problem is, based on the report, they show that right below the antenna, they are above the dose that is acceptable. These people that go frequent that are going to be right next to that. So I'm going to have the sign in front of my house, and these people are going to be exposed. So how is the company who owns the water reservoir going to protect that? That needs to be answered. So I need to see signage, where they're going to put it. Are they going to put a fence around it? I want to see silhouettes of how this is going to look for our community. I'm out of time.
Thank you. Judy Bruce, and then Diane Lerner.
My name is Judy Bruce. I'm from Simi Valley. First, let's be clear. The eventual 5G is a military-grade technology rolled out on a civilian population for mass surveillance and crowd control. This growing demand is an industry propaganda. At the last hearing, you approved the wireless facility because you were told that it's federal law. The FCC ruling is not a law. Title 47, the body of law that rules the telecommunications industry, cannot be found in the Code of Laws of Federal Regulations. There is no congressional act that mandates these poison delivery systems be imposed on us. This means our wireless ordinance is based on a false premise and is illegal. This takes that health issue right off the table. On the table, excuse me. The Telecommunications Act is a statute between the government and the wireless companies. It has nothing to do with the interaction of the people. So you're saying, well, if the FCC order is not law, then why haven't the lawyers and your paid consultants figured this out? Well, they're hiding the truth to keep you in self-doubt and fear. The FCC order is a scam. The FCC uses corruption, and the city attorney uses fear, where the people use law. At the last meeting, your paid consultant said, regarding Judy Bruce's comments, I really didn't know what to say. Well, how telling that he didn't respond to any of the facts in my presentation. In fact, all of his rebuttals on all of the comments were a complete whitewash. A partial transcript of your paid consultant's technical portion of his RF safety comments clearly points out why the facts are not on his side. The top of this ruler, he says, is where we can measure effective heating. The standard is based on heating. It's not a DNA change or non-ionizing emissions. It's just heating. Wait a minute. Your paid consultant just advised the Thousand Oaks City Council that non-ionizing radiation cannot affect human health, which is based on science 50 years out of date. And why did the Bioinitiative Consortium decide effects on human health are measured at 100,000 times lower than the FCC standards? The fact is that DNA damage is one of the most heavily researched areas in EMF. While some studies may express uncertainty about the non-ionizing radiation, thousands of studies do not.
I need you to wrap it up, please.
Your paid consultant should understand this. And this is how the city honors their commitment to protect the city. So the 5G infrastructure is a kill grid and is destroying humanity. And before you do anything, you must demand that where is the congressional act that imposes these poison delivery systems on the city?
Thank you. I'm asking you to not do that. It's not fair to the speakers. It's not fair to the applicant. Diane Lerner, and then Vadim Mazos.
I love her. My name is Diane Lerner, and I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks. I have been for over 21 years. And I've come here tonight behind many who have voiced opposition to 5G or small cell, whatever it is, but basically onslaughts of high-intensity killer radiation. There's been ample supply of evidence presented that more than confirms that this level of radiation is extremely dangerous to human and environmental health, as well as the fact that our properties, of course, will be devalued, put our homes at great risk for fires. That's minimal. That's trivial compared to the health concerns. And so I'm pretty much reiterating what's already been said, especially with what Judy has just expressed. But basically, since there, again, has been zero, I emphasize zero, evidence that this incredibly high level of radiation is safe, and a preponderance of evidence that basically states it's harmful and there's a whole health of problems that can come with it, including cancer. I just wonder why this has gotten as far as it has. Our fundamental human rights are being violated. It's been brought to my attention that we currently have cell towers already in place around schools and churches, which I find this shocking since children are one of the most vulnerable to this radiation as their brains are developing. So I ask everyone here just to put on a common sense cap and ask how this can be happening. This is outrageous and should be considered a crime against humanity and nature. What has happened to our basic common sense is mind-boggling. Are our lives no longer of value? There needs to be a moratorium on these cell towers, until the FCC can figure out or gets informed of the numerous scientific studies and research that prove 5G is completely unsafe.
Thank you. Next we have Vadim Massos, and after that, Paige Nielsen.
Thanks for listening.
My name is Vadim Manjos, and I'm asking for 3 minutes because I think it's unfair. Number one, English is not my first language. Secondly, I cannot speak and think in English as fast as you guys do. And thirdly, I believe it's unfair because 17 speakers speak only twice as much as a presenter. I'm here to deny the application of Verizon.
Excuse me, what city do you live in?
I'm sorry?
What city do you live in?
I live in Newbury Park.
Terrific.
Yeah, Newbury Park resident, father of 6 children, local beekeeper. I know the damaging effect of wireless radiation on the bees. When colony collapse hit my bees and I lost a lot of them, I didn't know the answer. I found out it later, and now from once I found out that Faraday cage, if you know what I'm talking about, protects the bees, I started to apply this method after many different trials, and then since then my bees are doing fine. But Faraday cage has to be grounded. I cannot ground my children wearing the wires all around and my family. So I'm here to ask you again to deny the application because everybody knows, I think everybody, because majority of people I talked to already know about damaging effect of 4G. And then Mr. Kramer tried to present it here that all roads lead to Rome. I'm sorry, not to Rome, to Congress and to Washington. It's not true. You are our representatives. You have to protect us and our health. Because my daughter is the youngest daughter. She's a cheerleader at Newbury Park. They have a tower right next to it. Has a bleeding nose for, I don't know, for the last 2 years, even though 5G hasn't rolled out yet. I just can imagine damaging effect on a 5G what would happen. My wife has excruciating headaches, and then we found out just recently that we live only at about, I measured it was 120 steps. So it's around 200 feet, 220 maybe. I don't know how my feet, my steps are not that big, up to 60 centimeters, 0.6 meters. So I even offered twice already, or 3 times I offered to do experiment with my bees of a damaging effect of 4G, and nobody responded. So it seems to me that you're not interested to see how damaging the effect of 4G and radiation on the bees, which will be, very obvious. Closer you put to the tower, then you'll see the massive collapse right there quite quickly. Of course, I'm not going to put Faraday cages around that. And nobody ever responded. I provided twice to city council and mayor, my sagebees@gmail.com. Nobody's interested. Why? So please deny the application of Verizon Wireless for another towers. We don't need it. I was on Saturday walking the neighborhood, 5-star reception or 5 blocks. I mean, everything is so cool. The reception is excellent. We don't need more of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Paige Nielsen and then Ken Unger.
the U.S. Supreme Court, I'm from Westlake Village, Page. The U.S. Supreme Court of Appeals and the California Supreme Court, not the feds, confirmed and told you that the city has the sole police power for the health and safety of its residents. It's your responsibility to obey the law and protect the people. The FCC's mission is not to issue laws, but to issue regulations to help interpret its own clarification of the Telecom Act. The city is also responsible for making sure its actions don't interfere with the body of the laws for the Fair Housing Act and ADA. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals struck down the attempt of the FCC to take away the city's rights to say they have to put up these towers. 3 times they quoted the Bi-Initiative report. 2 times they mentioned the RF exposure as relevant in any environmental analysis. We found that some of the things that your paid consultant told us Thursday, August 15th, were not exactly accurate. If you meet with us, which we're asking and requesting, which is also by law, we will sit down with him and all of us. The Fair Housing Act protects its residents, stating they have the right to a quiet enjoyment. These towers have ruined in our community already people that have spoken here for the last 6 months with their children, how sick they are. One family of 4 has 4 different types of blood cancer. We have witnessed, and these people that say they don't know, they are parents, they are grandparents. They should be learning. You should all be learning. We have put together building biologists, radio frequency engineers, doctors, and scientists in our community for the last 8 months. We speak all across up and down the coastline. We help people. You guys need to step up. You're ruining our city. You have every right by the FCC. So forgetting 2 minutes is ridiculous because Kramer gets as much as he wants. People can't live in their homes anymore. They are sick, and more people are going to get sick, and the city's worried about getting sued. Well, the people in the community are saying when they get $500 million or $1 billion when everyone's sick and they can't live in their homes anymore, that's not okay. The U.S. Access Board recognizes that multiple chemical sensitivities and electromagnetic sensitivities may be considered disabilities under the ADA if they are so severely impaired by the neurological, respiratory, or other functions of an individual that it substantially limits one or more of the individual's major life activities. It already is happening that we've been talking to you about. Electromagnetic sensitive people that are now microwave sickness, who are already ill, disabled by the equipment that must be projected now. You are breaking the law if you do not protect us. Under the law, the city has the initial and meaningful interactive dialogue that's in compliance with the law as stated in the ADA and Fair Housing Act. The ADA appeal is within the FCC Section 255 in the Telecommunications Act. We request you sit down with us and not give us 2 minutes anymore and listen to us and not the people you're paying a lot of money to come here and tell you what's wrong.
Thank you. Ken Unger and then Wanda Collier.
Good evening. My name is Ken Unger. I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks. I live on West Bend Road, which is approximately, my house is approximately between 100 and 200 feet down below the proposed location of the cell towers. I'm an architect and I have 5 children. I just built my home just below the property. I've lived in Thousand Oaks for 23 years. I don't know that I'm going to add any additional insight into what you've already heard tonight, except to express my dismay at the situation. As an architect, what we have to do when we design a house around an oak tree is crazy. Yet here we have a situation where we're affecting the health and welfare of your residents, the city of Thousand Oaks. Yet it's possibly going to be approved. That just boggles my mind. We elect you guys. We pay our tax dollars for you to represent our best interests, our health, and our well-being. And to me, it's just crazy that this is even being considered. I live in Club Estates. I don't know that you ever contacted them or that homeowners association because I never heard from them. I never heard anything about it. I want to live here for the rest of my life. I love Thousand Oaks. I love my community. I want to be here, but I want my health maintained. I want the health of my children maintained. I don't understand how this can even be considered.
Thank you. Wanda Collier, and then Gregory Fortner.
Wanda Callio, North Ranch. I've lived in Thousand Oaks since 1965, in North Ranch for 35 years. No one in my area had been notified by the HOA or anyone else about any of this. This was only by word of mouth. And our cells all went off during the fires. All 9 of them were going in the entire area. So the lady that had the no service was not in North Ranch. And I'm definitely opposed to this. And we had 5 towers added on Westlake Boulevard in January. There is no reason why no one has no service in North Ranch. I was never notified of any of this through anybody, anyway. And I'd like to know, what do I need to do to have evidence from Verizon that we need more cell towers in our area? This is transmitting radiation approximately 9 to 1,000 feet in a circumference, and which is approximately the same distance of 3 football fields. This radiation penetrates through buildings. How about the effect of the water tank? Is it going to affect everyone's water now? I'd like answers for some of these questions. And I think Verizon should attach a door hanger on everybody's door in bold print, not in tiny letters to where people that wear glasses can't even read them, before all applications are even submitted to the city. I just don't know what else to say, because I'm definitely opposed to this, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have Gregory Fortner and then Mandy Jacob.
Madam Chairman, council members, good evening. My name is Gregory Fortner. I live on 4487 Sunny Hill Street. I'm a Verizon wireless customer for 20 years. I've not had a problem with my wireless coverage. Then again, I have a Samsung Galaxy phone, so maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. Additionally, we have friends visiting from all over the world, from Russia, Kazakhstan, Italy, coming to our house for barbecues. They don't have any cell phone problem. I'm sorry for those that do, but I can tell you as a resident, that's not an issue that's off the table. My concern here coming tonight is 3 things. Number 1 is, of course, the aesthetic issue of having antennas up there. Everyone in the neighborhood will be affected by that. We in particular, we are approximately less than 100 meters from where those antennas will be. That's going to affect, at some point, our home values and our taxes that we will be paying for the property. Number 2, of course, the concerns about the medical issues, which we're told are not an issue, but we believe otherwise. And just quickly, number 3 is we believe that there are many other alternative locations for where those, if needed for coverage for other people. There are many others from the north of Canaan, to the west of Westlake Boulevard, and even to the east. There's wide open spaces. Now again, it may be a little bit more costly for Verizon to lay the lines in, for utilities and stuff, but it can be done, and minimal impact to residents and house property values. Lastly, I want to say I'm astounded and appalled by Mr. Kramer's comments to you that you have no choice. You have nothing to do. They're in compliance. The decision has been made. All you have to do is rubber stamp what you're being told to do, and that's it. You don't think. I can tell you, with having 30 years in business, both foreign and domestic, that just because someone tells you it is the truth doesn't necessarily mean it's so. Thank you.
Thank you. Mandy Jacob, and then Audrey Bruckner.
Thank you so much for your time this evening. I also wanted to commend the Commission on their brilliant questions. So I had a speech, but I want to get to the questions. We now
I'm sorry, could you state your city of residence for the record?
Newbury Park.
Okay.
Yes, we now have on record that, according to your consultant, that everything goes to Congress. Well, if everything goes to Congress, let's go to the city of Rancho, Palos, Verdes versus Abrams. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that you, as a local municipality, are entitled to cooperative federalism, whereby you can police your decision. Then he said again, your hands are tied. Let's go then to what the California Supreme State Court said. T-Mobile versus, and this was recent, the 4th of April, LLC versus the City and County of San Francisco. Again, they say there's no need to consider what they have except the health and safety of your residents. Now, why is it that you are believing this myth? I understand that you pay him $250,000, but it is a myth started by the telecom industry for you to think that you have your hands tied. You don't. You have a federal court, you have a state court. Recently, as recent as last week, the 19th of August, the DC Court of Appeals struck down the FCC's attempt to preempt local land by calling it, and I quote, arbitrary and capricious standards, impulsive standards of the FCC. They quoted the Bioinitiative report, which was written, one of the scientists that wrote that lives here in Thousand Oaks. He's been begging for, we keep coming back to say, can we please talk to you? I know you think Mr. Kramer is esteemed. He's probably part of the IEE. This person is a lifelong member of the IEE and has too many, Trevor Marshall is his name, has too many, I only have 2 minutes, so I'm going to move on. The next thing he said was, health and safety is out of bounds. Okay, so we've been coming for 6 months to tell you health and safety is not out of bounds. We are in the state of California, the TCA Act of 1996 speaks specifically to this in section 703. I want to go Part 3, Section 3370.2 says public health and safety is determined by the municipality. There are people who are sick who are covered by the ADA under the U.S. Access Board, which has much more teeth than an FCC regulation, which has been called by him and your attorneys a law. It is not a law. So not only are you going to be pulling on lawsuits by the DOJ, HUD, Fair Housing Act, the city is in major violation. And okay, do one more bit of research. Please find out what happened and ask Mr. Kramer about the AT&T wireless versus City of Carlsbad.
Thank you. Audrey Bruckner, and then Hossein Afshar.
Good evening, everyone. I'm a citizen of Thousand Oaks. I am opposed to Verizon's plans to install 12 large wireless cell towers in North Ranch and another 14 in Newberry Park. I do not support the philosophy that the people in our community who are disabled due to 4G technology are to be dismissed as collateral damage. Please see 5gcrisis.com for more information. When Swisscom, a major telecom service provider for Switzerland, recently launched 5G in their country, the people in Geneva on the day of antenna activation reported loud ringing in their ears, intense headaches, unbearable earaches, insomnia, chest pain, fatigue, and not feeling well inside their homes. And as was mentioned earlier, the 5G microwave radiation penetrates through the outer structure of homes and buildings into their interior 24/7. You cannot turn it off. When the citizens of Geneva called Swisscom to report their symptoms, they were told that everything was legal and within the guidelines. Ann Mills, author of All EMF'd Up, experienced identical problems when she and her husband were stationed in Germany. Like the people in Geneva, her concerns were dismissed. When she found a knowledgeable German physician, Dr. Horst Egger, he told her that her symptoms were due to microwave illness as seen in military radar personnel and people working on microwave towers. Dr. Scott Eberly, a California physician, explains how he discovered his own electrosensitivity in his book, What's the Diagnosis, Doctor? About 3 to 30% of the general population experience symptoms from the outset, depending upon their age, condition of health, and their location. There are questions about how long-term use over the years could affect the rest of the population who are more resilient in the beginning. Doctors need to be aware of microwave illness so that they can properly diagnose and treat patients who have these symptoms. The 5G rollout is...
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I do have handouts if anybody wants them.
And now we have Hossein Afshar.
Good evening. My name is Hossein Afshar, and I'm an interventional cardiologist, physician, who lives not too far from the proposed project. As a cardiologist, I've dealt with radiation for over 40 years, and I know very well even low amount of radiation can be detrimental to the human health. As Dr. Tojayan said, there are ample evidences and he presented all those scientific literature, which I really like all of you to go through it before making decision, that the radio frequency radiation is detrimental, and not only it produces symptoms like headache, dizziness, insomnia, and many other things. It, in long range, especially in 5G, in 5G, it can cause more health hazards. So I'd suggest that those literature be reviewed, and those are scientific literature. And also, when it comes to the Verizon and our area, we have had absolutely no problem with reception. I've had calls from hospital, from anywhere, from my colleagues, and never ever I had problem receiving it. So I suggest that you would respectfully oppose this project. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the end of my speaker cards. Is there anybody else who wants to fill one out and say something? You need to see the clerk and fill it out. And while you're doing that, I will read into the record that we have statement cards. People who do want to express their opinion but don't want to speak, they fill out the green speaker statement cards. And we have 8 opposed and 3 in favor. And then we did get, last minute to the meeting, we did get a letter that was opposed. So I'll let everybody know about that.
Madam Chair, if I may, I think there's a small amount of overlap between the written speaker cards and some of the people who spoke here tonight.
Okay.
At least 1 or 2 of the names
Okay.
were also oral speakers.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. 2 more speaker cards, Tanya Fox and then Jocelyn Stewart.
Good evening. I have lived in Thousand Oaks, Westlake for 20 years. I am EMF sensitive, and I oppose any new additional cell towers near residences as they are not safe. For about a year, I have noticed memory problems, tinnitus, heart palpitations at night, and in this space right now, a migraine is forming. People in our community who live near the new cell towers that have been popping up are already sick. I used to come into this space many years ago with my children for children's concerts. I can't even imagine bringing them into this space right now with the industrial Wi-Fi in the room. I don't know what it is. When the Apple store at the mall expanded to its current gigantic size, I noticed a heaviness on my head when I walked in. That wasn't the case before. I could be in that store before for an hour with my family, but not anymore. I would love to downsize my own home and maybe move out into a townhome that I saw in Newbury Park recently, but I cannot buy a home near a cell tower as the recently approved one in Newbury Park by the In-N-Out. These cell towers will hurt property values and harm future real estate transactions. Please deny the North Ranch cell tower application. Thank you.
Thank you. Jocelyn Stewart will be our final speaker.
Good evening. I'm Jocelyn Stewart. I live in the North Ranch neighborhood. I've lived there for 20 years, and I understand a lot of people here tonight have concerns about health. Safety is the other side of that coin, and the reason that the residents of North Ranch need and want this cell tower primarily is for safety. I know some people are concerned that they didn't get notice of tonight's meeting or of the building of the proposed cell tower. I am one of the people who did not get notice of the fires in advance of the evacuation. My husband and myself and my daughter were all at home and did not get any notice at all whatsoever on our cell phones of the evacuation. That is due to the poor cell service in our neighborhood that does exist. I know several people here tonight are claiming that they don't have a problem with cell service. There's absolutely a very, very terrible problem with cell service in North Ranch. I walk through the neighborhood on a daily basis with my dog, and the cell service goes in and out and is mostly out all through the neighborhood. It's just a safety issue. I mean, it's convenience, yes, but it's mostly a safety issue. My teenage daughter was home alone recently overnight, and when my husband and I were gone, our Wi-Fi went down because we do have Wi-Fi in the home that boosts our cell service. When the Wi-Fi went out, she was panicked because she had no cell service in our home. It was late at night. She got in her car and drove a mile or two from our home and pulled over along the side of the road to make a phone call and to call us and tell us that she did not have cell service at home. So this was a young teenage girl out on the road after midnight in the middle of nowhere just so she could call her parents and feel connected. This is another safety concern. There's a fire station at the corner of North Ranch and Upper Ranch, of Westlake Boulevard and Upper Ranch. Canaan, I always forget. Canaan and Upper Ranch. Recently, I was informed by the firefighters at that fire station that whenever they leave the fire station, whether it's on an emergency call or for any reason, they lose cell service on their cell phones. That makes me very, very nervous that our first responders, when they leave that fire station, do not have cell service. Thank you for telling me that my time is up.
Excuse me, I was very lenient with certain people. I expect some respect right now, but you do need to wrap it up.
Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. At this point, we will go back to the staff for follow-up comments.
Yes, Madam Chair. Regarding the one of the speakers brought up the issue of people climbing up or walking the area. That's the reason why a FRP or a barrier is required in front of the antennas under condition number 7 and 8, and also signages are being required under condition number 9. And with that, I believe Dr. Kramer here will respond to all other issues. Thank you.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, there's a lot to okay. How's this? Great. There's a lot to unpack, so I'm going to kind of go through in the order of the speakers and talk about a number of the issues that they have raised. Just as a general overarching conversation, nothing has changed in terms of what's within our field of review and what's not within our field review. When we talk about distance from homes, and a number of the speakers talked about putting the cell site further up the hill, things like that, there are technical problems that the applicant can talk about, but primarily the problems come from the fact that if, for example, I was trying to provide cell coverage to the 3 chairs over there, I could provide it close to it, or I could provide it from over here, but to get to there is going to interfere with other cell sites in the area. So one of the problems with moving a cell site high is that it causes interference to other cell sites. Again, the applicant can talk about that. There was some discussion tonight about market value, and the magic number is always 20%. There were a couple of reports from many years ago that postulated a 20%, not 19, not 21, but a 20% property drop. I've referred to myself as doctor. I have a doctorate in law and policy. I'm not an MD. When I did my doctoral research, in fact, it was partly on the subject of property value devaluation, and I looked at the court cases, all of them since the Telecom Act. And the courts want to see expert evidence not lay evidence, to argue this issue. You have no expert evidence in the record on this. As a practical matter, over the years, what we've seen is people now go into homes when they're looking to purchase it, and they carry their cell phone around to see what the level of coverage is within the home. So to the extent that that's a consideration, it seems to be changing. One of the speakers tonight talked about the fact that other companies in the area may have good coverage. Ninth Circuit case on point, Metro PCS versus San Francisco, said you only look at the provider before you to determine adequacy of coverage. And that makes sense when you think about it, because if you're a Verizon customer, you can't roam on AT&T's network. If you're a Sprint customer, you can't roam on Verizon's network. So the courts have told us that when we're looking at claims of adequate coverage in the area, you are only to look at the coverage from the applicant before you. Several speakers tonight have talked about the fact that they believe that FCC regulations are not enforceable upon the city. Well, that's just wrong law. I'm a lawyer. It's wrong law. And your city attorney can talk to you about that. But the practical reality is the FCC is delegated by Congress to create regulations to enact and enforce the intent of Congress. Now, in this case, Congress set out 47 CFR 47 USC 332C7, which talks about what our authority is and limitations on our authority, and the FCC has created rules to enact that. Now, we believe that some of the FCC rules are overextended in terms of their coverage, and in fact, our law firm, on behalf of our client, the League of California Cities, and therefore the city, is suing the FCC currently to roll back some of the regulations that are just even more overreaching than we can ever have conceived the FCC would try and do. So in terms of that, the FCC regulations are enforceable against the city, and if you want 100 court cases where that's happened around the country, I can give it to you, but you don't need it. There's been talk tonight about ADA. So let's talk about the ADA and RF sensitivity. There is one and only one case on point on that issue. It's not in the circuit, it's in the 10th Circuit. It's Furstenberg versus the city of Santa Fe, New Mexico. And that's the only case on point. And that case set out a couple of things. Number one, ADA does not apply to cell sites, cell siting matters. It's just not. And the reason is because the FCC rules are different than ADA, but the only case on point does not apply ADA to it, and it doesn't make it a harm that can be recompensed by a local city council. There was also a reference to the Abrams versus Rancho Palos Verdes case. Now that case was actually the outcome of a planning hearing where Mark Abrams put up some antennas and got into a fight with the city. But the case in front of the Supreme Court was whether he could collect what are called 1983 damages, civil right damages, against the city of RPV, and the answer was no. So there was no Supreme Court ruling on that other than whether 1983 damages were applicable. One speaker told you that you should ask me about Carlsbad, AT&T versus Carlsbad. Happy to talk about it. Back in 2000, I was an expert witness for the city of Carlsbad, and in fact, I had determined that there were some alternative sites to AT&T site, and the court and the city ended up denying the site. AT&T sued. The judge said that my particular testimony was not relevant to the issue, and he didn't include it. I've never been excluded as an expert in any case, just for clarity. Really, that's it. So what we're left with is, again, this is really an aesthetic process for the city. In terms of the RF safety issues, let me go back and talk one additional comment. Oh, I'm sorry, two. Number one speaker asked you to impose a moratorium. Again, regardless of how they may feel about the FCC's authority over the city, the FCC has explicitly barred local jurisdictions from instituting moratoriums on cell sites. Happened in August last year. So that's not even a possibility. That presumes that you agree that the FCC regulations have effect and control over states and local governments. That's the position I take. One more, just a moment. Well, I apologize. Sometimes I can't read my own writing in the heat of trying to keep up with the speakers. So we're back to your consideration of this project. I advise you as an attorney. Oh, I remember what it is. I make $250,000. Wish I did. Don't. My contract with the city, since it was brought up, has a cap of $250,000. And let me tell you how I'm paid. My firm is paid from the city. Applicants file applications. They pay as part of that application fee a deposit to cover our costs. But we will never accept a fee, any sort of fee from a wireless company, because that would suggest that we're working for them. In fact, our sole loyalty, and one of the reasons why we have a contract with the city and have contracts with the city since 1987, is because we work for the city, not for the people who come before it. And the reason it's a $250,000 contract is because the city has to move money through the accounts. Our contract doesn't pay us $250,000. Our contract is based on the number of projects we review, and we're solely responsible for this to the city because of the proper way it's set up. Again, if you have any questions on that, I'm sure the city attorney can talk about that. So that's what I've got for you.
And Madam Chair, may I add, just for some of the, there were some members of the public that spoke regarding notification. Just so you know that the application was noticed, we sent out a notice of application back in January, and also another notice of public hearing was sent out 2 weeks prior to the hearing. And the large sign was posted about at least 45 days, sometime early in July, before the hearing. That's about 45 days at least from the date of this today's hearing. And that's all I have to add. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair?
Sure.
Thank you. Just one more comment, a couple comments. You heard Dr. Kramer discuss the federal regulations, and I will just tell the commissioners they are controlling for us, just like other similar things such as tax law and tax regulations, etc. You also heard a speaker discuss a couple of recent cases, one out of San Francisco, one recent has to do with tribal lands. Again, very positive cases in as far as victories for the local government or local agency. We're always looking at cases to ensure that we are protecting the city to the extent that we can. Those two cases, while very positive for that particular issue, are not addressing RF emissions whatsoever. That requirement that we must comply with federal government on the RF emissions is still the law. And these cases, while we might be able to use them for the California League of Cities lawsuit against the FCC, it might help in that sense. It's not something that is going to change the way that we have to do our ordinance currently based on the applicable federal requirements at this time.
Thank you. At this time, the applicant can come back. No? Commissioner?
Well, please tell me, Madam Chair, whether it's appropriate to ask follow-up questions of staff at this time or after.
Well, according to my cheat sheet here, we have the applicant come back, and then we ask questions of staff. Is that all right with everybody?
All I would say is that if you're going to ask questions to staff, I actually would suggest that you ask them now. One, because they're fresh and they just made comments, but also we do have the applicant who has a rebuttal, and we want to make sure that if there's any changes in a condition or anything like that, that the applicant has a final chance to discuss that. So my recommendation would actually be to go ahead and ask questions to staff now that might have been sharp in the person's mind based on what was just said.
Okay, in that case, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm not going to continue.
I'm sorry. We're not going to have comments from the audience at this point. The time for that has passed. Please be respectful. Please be respectful. We need you to be respectful and let this go in an orderly manner. Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm trying to follow up on some of the comments that speakers such as yourself have made and get clarity on some points that I tried to listen and understand as well as I could. I'm not sure that I fully understood every point that was made, and I want to follow up on several of them. So with that, my understanding from the staff report was that the application before us is for 12 antennas. It's either 3 banks of 4 or 4 banks of 3. One of the speakers, Mr. Sellers, made reference to 108 antenna sites. Is he referring to, well, without getting into what's in Mr. Sellers' mind, what is the number of antennas at this site before us this evening?
12.
12. Okay, thank you. Mr. Sellers also made reference to another water tank. Is he referring to an alternative site?
No, that was mentioned in our staff report. This is the one located at 1090 Hartwick Circle. It is in comparison to this particular site where the antennas were installed on a fence, on an existing fence. The same one was the same case for 4990 via El Cerro, where it was approved back in 2017, I believe, December 2017, where we approved it, a similar installation of installing the antennas on the fence.
So that case, are you referring to the case in Dos Vientos?
Yes, it is.
So in addition to that case, there was another case involving a cell site on a water tower.
Yes.
Not in Dos Vientos, off of Lynn Road in
off of
Newbury
Lynn
Park.
Road and Hartwick Circle, across the hospital.
No, this is a different case. Not near Los Robles, but somewhere along Lynn Road in Newbury Park. There was another case involving a water tower. And I was surprised actually to see the Hartwick Road reference, because I think that was sometime back.
that was a tank. That was a water facility that's been approved way back when, before my time here with the city. And I don't know if Mr. Kramer would remember that particular location.
This is relatively recent. This is since 2017.
I'm sorry, I don't remember.
If I may, Mr.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. You're talking about Whitechapel.
Perhaps, yeah.
Whitechapel is on Sunset Hills Boulevard, behind the Sunset Hills Park, where it went to the Planning Commission twice.
No, not that case. That's a different case.
That's a different case.
Right. I believe there was another case in Newbury Park, but anyway, it's neither here nor there. The point is, these references to another tank are not referring to another tank in the immediate vicinity around North Ranch.
It's not.
We're not saying, hey, let's not put the antennas here. We'll put them at this other place in North Ranch. We're not referring to that. Okay. Dr. Kramer.
For clarity about the whole issue of where these sites go, wireless sites, for example, when wireless came to the Conejo Valley, some of the first sites were, for example, up in Rosno Peak, because they provided a large amount of coverage with very little capacity. So as cellular networks have grown and more users come onto the networks, the sites actually get closer and closer to the ground because the carriers want to constrain the coverage. They don't have an infinite number of frequencies. They reuse the frequencies that they have. So again, this gets back to my prior comment that cell sites up high actually are detrimental to the network. And within Thousand Oaks, we have a number of examples of cell sites immediately adjacent to residential areas. I'm thinking about the shopping center on Moore Park, it's Vaughn's, I
Chance?
think.
Vaughn's and
We have several cell sites on that building, and we have
Avenida Verano.
okay,
Open space.
and we have various cell sites immediately adjacent or within the same relative distance as this particular project is to the homes. So, I mean, this is not unusual for the city.
All right. Moving on. Mr. Walsh, in his testimony, spoke about the possibility of extending the antenna height from the planned 14 feet up to as much as 36 feet. So two questions. One, is that allowed? And two, what would be required if it is permitted? What would an extension to 36 feet entail?
This site has gone through years of work to camouflage the antennas. Gesundheit has gone through years of work to camouflage the antennas. Now, especially uncamouflaged sites, and we have a few in the city, can by right be increased in height under what's called Section 6409, 6409A technically. This is not that type of site because this is a camouflage site. That's one of the reasons why we have the wave, and we've gone through years of design refinement of the wave to provide camouflage for the antennas. And one of the very few elements within 6409 that remains within our local discretion is whether a proposed project would defeat the camouflage. I would estimate, without knowing the particulars of a project, that if something came in double the height, it would be very easy for the city to determine that that would defeat the camouflage of the existing site. So the thought about sites being increased in height is correct, but you have to look at the underlying site to determine whether it would comply. It's my opinion that what Mr. Walsh described would not be permissible by right. It would require them to come back in and go through this discretionary process, bring it back to you to see whether you felt it was aesthetically appropriate. So it's not a no permit process. In fact, it's a very detailed process.
Okay, but in theory, the antenna height could be extended, but there would be a permitting or a review and approval process around that.
Correct.
And there may be additional camouflaging requirement around that.
That would be up to the commission to determine what would be appropriate to not defeat the camouflage.
All right.
And that's the law.
Okay. And then to wrap up, just to review, this is something you've touched on already. Ms. Jacob referred to the RPV versus Abrams case. Do I understand correctly that case, the decision in that case, did not hinge on wireless issues? It hinged on whether whether Abrams could collect 1983 damages.
Specifically correct. It was only on whether he could recover his attorney's costs on a Telecom Act issue, and the court said no.
Okay, so I do have then a follow-up question. I mean, specifically what the speaker was getting at there was that the notion that a municipality is empowered in some way to make, in some sense, a health or safety ruling with regard to a wireless application. It's your testimony that Abrams did not deal with that issue. It dealt with another issue.
That's correct.
Number one. And to the larger question, I come back to the question I asked at the outset, which is that your understanding of the FCC regulations, is it correct, is that it's the FCC that determines what is in bounds with regard to health and safety, and our job is to determine whether any application complies with those FCC regulations, but neither the Abrams case nor any other case since 1996 has contradicted that. Is that an accurate reading?
100% correct.
All right. Thank you. Nothing further.
I do have a question. When I stood on Sunny Hill Street and faced the water tower, it was pretty well camouflaged. That's a good word. There were a lot of trees, there was a lot of landscaping, and you almost couldn't see the water tower at all. From the Mr. Chu's diagram, one of the 3 sets of cell site boxes, whatever you want to call it, antennas, is at that point where it is on the street. What I'd like to know is how much of it will be seen from the street and from the residences above the trees, between the trees and the foliage.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding that question, at this point, from the street, if you're looking at it from Sunny Hill Street, and I'm pointing at my project location here on the aerial, can't just find my pointer. Oh, there it is. There are heavy vegetation along the front of Sunny Hill Street. The antennas are located approximately on the north end of the water tank, next to the equipment enclosure. So with that, I mean, it seems like the antennas would be partially, if not totally, covered by the existing vegetation along that side of the water tank facility.
And then the other 2 were completely on the other side of the water tank.
Right, correct.
Okay.
And there are no vegetations on that side.
And there's no houses on that side.
There's a house on the southwest side of that water tank, which is, I'm looking at my, if you could, I refer you to the screen. It's around this area, and there's a house right in front of it.
Do you have an idea of how many feet away that is?
I would say about 100 feet. Now, with that mentioned, I would like to bring up to your attention other cell sites in the cities that are closer than 100 feet from existing single-family residences. One of them would be at the Sunset Hills Park at the corner of Monte Carlo, northeast corner of Monte Carlo and Herbs Road. There's one on Cross Bridge, northwest corner of Cross Bridge and Herbs. There are cell sites on the Sunset Hills, close to the Sunset Hills, on the side side. I believe that's Avenida Verano is how you access it. But there's an open space out there that has where Edison has an easement over transmission towers. There are 3 facilities out there. I would say it's Sprint, Verizon, and AT&T. Oh, I'm sorry, T-Mobile. And there's another facility similarly installed next to the 23 freeway on the west side of the 23 freeway on a nursery, which is antennas being exposed with arms supporting it. And that's about less than 150 feet from the nearest residence. And those are the facilities that I can recall as far as distances. So if we're comparing distances, then we can cite more examples, I believe, if we do the research.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, Commissioner?
All right. Actually, you just covered the first one I had. I was curious how many cell sites we had in TO that had close proximity. You can come up with a few off the top of your head, so that works for me.
I'm sorry.
I have a question about somebody mentioned during the public speaking, actually a couple of people did, medical emergencies and first responder access. I'm actually related to somebody who is a firefighter at that fire station. And I was curious, have we got documented concerns about people being unable to be reached? Are EMTs having trouble getting calls when they're in North Ranch? Do we have documentation on that? And does the city consider that?
No, we don't.
Okay, I was just curious.
As far as your question on the number of cell sites in the city, I would say it's about 140 cell sites
Yeah, I've got one across the street from me. The other question I had is other people have mentioned that they did and did not have issues during the mass broadcast during the fires and the evacuation. Do we have any statistics as far as the city's knowledge of how many people were reached successfully and how many weren't, neighborhood by neighborhood?
No, I don't. We don't.
I'm curious. And then somebody else mentioned property values and appraisals. You've addressed that, Doctor. I am curious, do we have any, you may be able to answer this, Dr. Fisher. Do we have any historical data as far as any cities installing cell towers anywhere and people having their properties reassessed and lowering their tax values or lowering their property values documented?
I can't think of any jurisdiction that we've worked for where that has ever come in, where there's actually been any sort of reassessment. I don't know whether there have been requests for reassessment, but I'm not personally aware of any actual reassessments because of the installation of a cell tower.
Okay. Mr. Chua, are you aware of any that happening within our own city district at any point?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, copy that. That'll be all. Thank you.
Are there any other questions of staff?
I have a quick comment
Come
to
on.
make. Thank you, staff, for your presentation. In regards to aesthetics for the southeast panel, as far as property owners being able to see that box from their homes, has there been a aesthetics point of view shown from their viewpoints and how they may be affected by the location of that box?
I don't. Can you please repeat the question? I don't get it.
Sure. So the three antenna sites on the water site, for the southeast corner of that site, there's two homes that are underneath that water well that have viewpoints looking up at the water well. And with this additional antenna now protruding from the water well, have there been a study of what their perspective would be from their homes?
No, reason being is because the city does not have any policies or standards regarding private views.
I see. And as regards for camouflaging, I understand that the front antenna will be camouflaged by the trees native to that area, and the rear southwest and southeast are not real camouflaged by any native vegetation. Was there any discussion about providing vegetation along the wrought iron fence of grapevines or anything to camouflage the antenna?
That is well within the purview of the Planning Commission. If the Planning Commission feels that additional camouflaging is necessary, then the Planning Commission may impose conditions requiring certain types of plants that is subject to staff review before building permit is issued. And we did the similar thing on Via El Cerro, which I mentioned earlier. Back then, we were proposing to put oak trees, but I believe that the residents did not want to see lots of oak trees, which is surprising. But we are required to put plantings either behind or in front of the antennas to kind of soften up a little bit the visual impact. And that's just an example of what the Planning Commission may be able to impose as a condition.
And in this case, given that Cal Water is a property owner of that water well, would the applicant have to first get permission from the owner for a plant scheme?
I would leave that up to the applicant. That question I can't speak on behalf of either the applicant or CalAm.
And in regards to any plant screening, does a city have a planting code or guidelines that the applicant would have to follow in order to plant?
Yes, we do have a landscape guidelines that the city normally follows. If the Planning Commission decides to impose a condition to provide landscape to reduce the visual impact of the antennas, then the staff will be working with the applicant or and their landscape consultants to provide the best possible way of putting the right plants in the right location.
I'd like to add, just so that you are thinking about this, while we certainly have the right to require landscaping, that landscaping can't block the antennas directly.
Right. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Heher, did you have something to say?
I was just going to say that, just for the commissioners, that one of the aspects of this project is that the fencing itself is part of the stealth aspect of what we've tried to request Verizon to do. So the fact that these antennas are actually on the fence line and into the fence, that's part of the stealth that we're looking at. And as Dr. Kramer said earlier, if there was an effort under 6409 to try to change and add to it, if you did the height different of the fence, of course, that would be something that might take away the stealth, and or the camouflage, and that's why Dr. Kramer brought that up. It's the fact that the fencing is part of the whole unique thing. Just like sometimes we have chimneys or a steeple, something of that nature. Sometimes in a faux facade. This is exactly what we've done. It, as Mr. Chua said earlier, we have a water tank up in a different location, and it has a faux fence in there, and those are the antennas. The other one was one in which we had a water tank, and there was a proposal to put oak trees behind the antennas, again, not in front to block it, but behind it. And the neighborhood residents came out and said, we don't mind the wireless facilities being there, we just don't want the oak trees because it stands out that they weren't there before, and now it looks different than what it was. And so I think that's what he was referring to before.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no more questions of staff, we'll bring the applicant up if he wishes for another 5 minutes.
On behalf of Verizon Wireless, 5 minutes, I would like to just address some of the concerns that the commission brought up, or questions rather. One of them being the distance between existing residents and the actual sectors. On page A1, sheet A1 of the zoning drawings that are last dated 12/18/17, which was part of the exhibits, we did identify the distances between the sectors and the homes, and keep in mind that those homes have a drop in elevation, so this is just an actual straight line across. It doesn't take into account the elevation difference. They range from 92 feet, 117, 360 feet. One is at 338 feet. One is at approximately 200, and one is at 183 feet. So those are the distances between the residents and the proposed cell sectors. We also submitted in the packet photographic simulations which depict the actual antenna placed on the proposed fencing. And if that was part of, I believe that's part of the exhibit, you can see that there were two views provided, one to the southeast, looking up at the water tank facility, and then one on Sunny Hill, which is heavily landscaped by mature pine trees. Those pine trees have actually grown over the past 4 years, so they've actually provided even more height and massing to their the broadness of the tree. So the two sectors that are facing the southeast and northeast, there is no existing landscaping. So that's the only thing. We looked at creating kind of a wave motion. We've discussed the wave motion of the fence line above the antennas to kind of give it a natural wave rather than the straight line height of a wrought iron fence. So that was something that was looked at. And then the painting of the black. We've looked at, in other cases over the years, I've been doing this quite some time, monopoles were built and we were painting them light blue, the color of the sky. And they were actually more visible because you couldn't get the exact color of the sky every single day. So we started playing around with other colors, and black was one of them. And we've seen actually black towers and lattice towers that have less visibility to the naked eye and beyond. So black kind of creates a little bit of stealthing effect just by the nature of the color. At night, it's very hard to see. If they were painted white or the fencing was painted white, it would stand out more. And then in the United States, over 50% of homes are currently abandoning their landline. It's a study. They've shown that most people are, just around 50% are going to wireless. And so that's something that the wireless carriers are trying to keep up with the pace of the demand of cell sites. And as the cell sites are being built now, as Dr. Kramer was explaining, you have to be closer to the end user because of capacity issues. So we're finding in these areas of the proposed site where it's topographically challenging, you have to be closer to the end user. So topography goes into the analysis, the capacity and coverage issues of the existing end user here. So that's kind of how we look at that. Had one gentleman discuss the barriers or the access of the public onto the water facility and access directly in front of the antenna sectors. That's possible. And I discussed that with the gentleman that I met, and with all due respect, I felt that he was generally okay with the site, but that was just the perception I was getting there. The opposition wasn't really discussed, more or less the safety of anybody accessing the private property. It is private property. We're within private property. The slope is private property. So anybody walking up to the front of the antennas at night or any time of the day, they're trespassing. So that is a concern, and I understand that. But we are going to be installing FCC-required signage in front of the sectors so that if somebody does, either whether it's general public or an individual working on the site, they understand that this is emitting RF emissions. It's within the regulations of the SCC guidelines, and there's a distance separation. That distance is going to be defined by a barrier that we're putting in front of the antenna, an additional wrought iron section where only Verizon can actually go through a lock gate, get into the sectors, and work on the antennas at any time if they need to. We did submit a third-party RF emissions report. It was provided to the city during the application process. It was prepared by Hammond and Edison. They're a neutral third party. They do RF emission studies all throughout the country. They're very reputable, and they assess our project based on the plans, and they looked at it and concluded that there is no effect other than, I'm sorry. And then we did provide an FCC statement that was prepared by Verizon stating that everything is in compliance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, if you'll stay up there, we may have some questions for you. Anybody? Questions? No questions? Okay.
I got a quick question. Would the applicant be open to any enhanced landscaping, such as vines on the gates, that can help provide some additional screening?
We would, but it would have to be limited in height, as certain types of species, typically species that have a lot of heavy oil in it, like eucalyptus, they do affect the signal quality. So anything that would grow up in front of it that would be mature could affect the quality of the service later, and then it could affect that. And we wouldn't be able to put any barrier landscaping behind it because it's an asphalt roadway that goes around the circumference of the tank. So we wouldn't be able to impose and encroach into that existing drive aisle for the water facility. But we could plant something on the hillside, and that would, of course, have to be discussed with the landowner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one other question. Some of the speakers during public comments urged an alternative site analysis that was not done by Verizon. I understand that's not something you can do. But with regard to the alternative site analysis that Verizon did provide, some of the sites are farther away from some homes than the application that's before us now. Do I understand correctly that if a site is farther away, for it to provide the equivalent level of service, it would need to emit signals at a higher power level, all else being equal, than the site that's proposed this evening.
The power level maintains consistency. Actually, the power level degrades as you get further and further away from the actual antenna. So based on topography, landscaping, whether you're indoors or outdoors or mobile in a vehicle, that also has an effect on the capacity and how it covers that area. So
you notice how I carefully skipped all those other factors because no one ever has problems with those. But omitting all those other factors, I mean, just with regard to if a cell user happens to be stationary for a moment, if an antenna is at the site that's being proposed tonight versus an alternative site that's farther away, my question is, to provide an equivalent level of service, would the site that's farther away need to transmit at a higher power level to deliver that same?
I understand what you're asking.
Yeah.
So that individual can make a phone call, and it's going to go to the sector, which whether it's site A or B, that has the capacity to take that phone call or transmit that video that they're looking at or transmit the data that they're texting. So that two sites could cover that individual in that specific location, but it's going to have to do with the capacity at that site at that given second in time. So
I'm not even asking about secondary sites. Assume, this is very hypothetical now, but assume this is the only cell site in Southern California. There's no other cell site around. If there's a cell site and a user who happens to be stationary and for the moment, there are no other extraneous factors, if the alternative site is farther away, would that farther away site need to transmit at a higher power level to deliver an equivalent level of service to that cell user? That's my question.
Yeah, I believe I understand it. The power level is not going to be defined based on that end user. The power level is consistent. So the power level, like I explained before, degrades as it gets further and further to the end user. So,
well, let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
How would the cell phone user experience service from that cell tower that's farther away? Again, omitting second towers, third towers, and other factors. Would they experience equivalent level of service if the tower is farther away, or would it be a degraded level of service?
Can I brought our RF engineer from Verizon. I'm sorry, I should be speaking to the Madam Chair. We brought our RF engineer. He's here for technical support.
I think it would be appropriate.
This is kind of a technical question that he might.
It's a very technical question.
Yeah,
I think that would be appropriate if he would answer this question. Yes.
So shall he just introduce himself and
Yes.
then can he answer the question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Please state your city of residence also.
My name is Imran Ilyas, EMRAN-ELYAS. I work with Verizon Wireless, and I'm a radio frequency engineer.
And you live in what city?
Can you hear me now?
I hear you, but for our record, we always need to know where you live. What city?
Can you, John Helminski again, can he state the address of his Verizon office?
Is
Yes.
that what you're asking?
Okay.
Okay.
15505 San Canyon, Irvine, California, 92618.
Okay.
And I just want to let you know because I do have a hearing issue and I'm wearing the hearing aid, but sometimes I have a problem. But I did understand your question and I would like to help you out on that one.
Please.
I think your question has 2 points. Pretty much all the cell sites. So we do transmit on the radio that has a power. So you can crank up to the maximum power that each radio has its limit. So in this case, when you said there's nothing, we are very easy to transmit at the max power. And if you go further away, you probably will not be able to reach. That's the number 1 point. In your TV and radio, you are only transmitting just go ahead and transmit it. In wireless communication, you are not just the transmitting, you are receiving. So you have a cell phone which is at the lower power. So if you crank up power, let's say if you have an option to crank up the power to whatever you want, like 5,000 watts that AM radios are doing, you can do it, but then your cell phone will not be able to communicate back. So we call it uplink and downlink. So your downlink coming from the tower to the radio, to the phone is fine, but from phone to the phone, then you are losing your communication. So this is one of the reasons. So when we design all the areas, we wanted to make sure that we have both links are a balance. I think that's answered your question.
It does. Thank you. Thanks for providing that additional
you.
detail.
Do we have any other questions?
Okay. Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Oh, we do have somebody signaling over there.
Yes, thank you. In response to, just to clarify Commissioner Cohan's comments about the landscaping, if the Planning Commission were to choose to approve the project with the conditions, a condition could be further added, requiring the maintenance of the existing landscaping in a mature condition, so they could not remove that landscaping to expose it from the Sunny Hill perspective. In furtherance to that condition, you could require the applicant to plant or strategically plant a selected type of landscaping in an appropriate location on the southeast and southwest areas of the site in front of the panels. That would not interfere with its operation, but allow staff to review that request. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kramer, did you have something else to add? Okay. Okay. The attorney has recommended that, would you mind coming back if we were to impose that condition on you regarding the landscaping? Can you come up and give us an answer whether that would be acceptable to you?
Again, John Helminski. Yes, that would be acceptable to us. We would provide a landscape design based on the feedback we get from the Planning Commission tonight, incorporate that into the plans and the exhibits back to the Water District, as well as through Plan Check.
And agree to maintain the mature landscaping on the other side?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Any questions of staff? Okay. At this point, I will close the community meeting, turn off the lectern. I will now open the floor to a motion or discussion. Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm becoming increasingly frustrated with the fact that our local control is being taken away, whether it's housing, whether it's airplanes that actually fly over my house. In fact, I actually live closest to one of the water tanks and new cell towers that was actually approved last year. It's happening all over the place, and there's lots of things that we get frustrated about that we would like to have a comment on and involvement with. What I do at that moment, especially when I have an application, the first thing I do is look and see what is my obligation. Because at the end of the day, I may want to actually take on the world, but I'm a specifically appointed person. We are not elected representatives. We are not your city council. We are not legislators. We do not make law in that sense, and we can't make law. That would be above and beyond our task. And in fact, as I was looking, as people were talking, our task is to perform the duties and functions set forth in the planning and zoning laws and the zoning regulations set forth in the municipal code. That's it. We look at things like aesthetics. We don't decide health emissions. We don't decide lots of things that we get into tonight. And I'm frustrated because I'm a lawyer by trade, and this is all things that obviously I would love to get into and actually address for all of you. The problem is we don't have that authority, in my opinion. In fact, I don't have that authority, and I don't think the commission does, because we would be making law in violation of our appointment and in violation of ultimately the oath we took to the city to make sure that we were only enforcing rules. We don't make rules. We don't make laws. We enforce the rules. In this situation, from everything I've seen and heard so far, the aesthetics of the process, especially if we add Commissioner Cohen's additional comment, fits the rules and regulations. I don't see anything actually that would be in violation of the rules and regulations regarding the aesthetics. Are there other issues I'm concerned about? Yes. And by the way, I've spent probably 30 to 40 hours reading all of the underlying evidence and documents. I read the DC case, by the way, which involved a 5G network. This is not a 5G issue. I'm saying it's not right now. So I've read a bunch of things, and I understand a lot of the concerns, and obviously I understand property values. I understand all of that thing. The problem, though, is this is not the right board, in my opinion, to actually address that issue. So the issue at the end of the day, though, is for purposes of this application.
Please, the community portion of this is finished.
For purposes of this application, we're looking specifically at whether or not it fits the rules and regulations, and I believe it does. And therefore, I would move to approve the application, subject to the additional comment that Commissioner Cohen made with regard to the landscaping.
Is there a commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to begin my comments by thanking every single person in the audience for coming to speak tonight and making your views known on all sides of the issue. What you're doing is extremely important and represents the very best of our democracy, and I hope you will continue to fight, regardless of what you believe, regardless of whether we agree. I think what you're doing is great, and I appreciate that very much, and we all do. So thank you very much for that. Now that said, I phrased my thanks with the premise that there are two sides to this issue, and that's really a false premise. There are many sides to this issue, and all of us, myself included, go into this with some preconceptions that may or may not be correct. In some of the public comments, I heard the implicit premise that all of us are somehow sort of paid stooges for the telecommunications industry. Not true. Commissioner Lanson, in a much more measured way than I could, explained the law quite well. We often say here, we're an appointed body. Our job is to implement policy. We don't make policy. And that's true whether we're talking about putting up a house in Thousand Oaks or in dealing with federal law, which has been established in this case since 1996. We're not talking tonight about whether we think the FCC rule is good or bad. Personally, I have a big problem with the current chair of the FCC, Ajit Pai. This is a guy who's bragged about being a puppet. He's joked about being a puppet for Verizon. That's horrifying to me. So I want to endorse Dr. Kramer's comment about going to Congress and getting a better public servant in that position as soon as you can. I think that's in the interest of every American, not just the people who were brave enough to show up this evening. It's not just about whether we're for or against Verizon. That's not the question before us tonight. I'm a recovering network engineer. I spent 30 or 40 years dealing with networking issues, including RF engineering, since 1993. Most of that time was fighting against incumbent telephone providers. In fact, the whole history of the internet is one of incumbent providers being dragged along, kicking and screaming, and saying this can't be done, when a bunch of renegade, long-haired, ponytailed, Birkenstock-wearing engineers built the internet in spite of them, and I was on that side. This is not necessarily a pro-Verizon or pro-incumbent telecom history. In my opinion, the incumbent telecom providers have too much power now, but that's not the question before us. That's a question for Congress. That's a regulatory question. The question that is before us tonight, and it's the only one, is the application before us aesthetically in bounds? Can we do things to make it better if it's not? And does it comply with the FCC regulations as we all understand them? We're not talking about types of service that are not being provided here. We're not making health and safety determinations. I would welcome the chance to talk with all of you more about RF issues, about ionized versus non-ionized radiation, about how much radiation emissions there are from the light bulb on your bedside table compared with cell towers. I'm happy to have that conversation. I'm happy to sit down with you with a spectrum analyzer and compare emissions from different kinds of devices, but that's not why we're here tonight. We're here to discuss, and only to discuss, aesthetics and compliance with FCC regulations. Those are the only things before us tonight. So while I appreciate everyone's views and comfort or discomfort with what is and isn't permitted, that's not what we're here to discuss. I'll wrap up my remarks with one more thing. I want to respond to something that Ms. Bruce of Simi Valley said, that this is a mass surveillance technology. I don't disagree with you in terms of what telecom providers are doing, but they don't need cell service to do mass surveillance. Verizon, who is our applicant tonight, this is far out of scope for what we're discussing. Verizon paid $4.8 billion for Yahoo so it could do data mining of Yahoo emails. So there's private companies doing mass surveillance, there's government mass surveillance. None of that touches on wireless. It's a completely orthogonal issue. It may be done using wireless technology, but it's a different issue, and it's way out of scope for what we're discussing tonight. So I think you and I might find common cause for many of the civil liberties issues that you've raised, but that's not really why we're here tonight. We're here to make a determination on whether an application meets aesthetic grounds and whether it complies with existing FCC rules, which far predate the current FCC leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner?
I appreciate everybody coming out as well. I listened to everything that everybody said, and I understand that everybody that came here was motivated to some degree or another by fear of your health, fear of your safety, fear of your property values. And I'm a person that's sympathetic to those fears. I was married to a person that had ovarian cancer and contracted it at a very young age. So I know about being afraid about your health. I have 3 daughters, so I can empathize with somebody being afraid for their daughter's safety if they can't reach their father. I understand as a real estate agent the fear of losing the value of your home. And so I want you to know that despite the fact that I can empathize with all of the comments that all of you had, I do recognize that I am limited, as everybody else said, by what we are allowed to consider here. And I am not always allowed to interject my own personal feelings and my personal opinions into what I have to look at here. And so, we are kind of stuck where we are. And as everybody else has encouraged you up here, it is important to be vocal. It is important to talk about what is important to you as far as your community goes. And so I do value that everybody came out here to do that. And I encourage you to do that with all of your elected officials and do it all the time and be very loud. And so thank you very much.
Are there any other comments? I just want to say that my fellow commissioners have been very eloquent on the matter, and I agree with them. And I do appreciate your efforts and all of your opinions. And I appreciate the staff work. And so at this point, I think we're ready for a vote.
If I may, Madam Chair, before we vote, just for clarification, if you will, Commissioner Lanston, your recommendation or your motion was to approve the request based on the findings and subject to the conditions. I think I heard you say that you wanted to include the landscape condition. Is that correct? I just want to make sure we're clear for the record that you want to include that.
Yes, that would be correct.
So if we we have staff please read that condition again, just to be clear on the record of what that condition states?
Thank you, Mr. Hager. The suggested condition for landscape would be as follows, and I quote, "The applicant shall install landscaping around the southwest and southeast
east sectors of the facility to reduce the visual impacts of the antennas. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall submit landscape plans for review and approval by the Community Development Department. Such landscaping shall be maintained in healthy condition at all times.
Madam Chair, we would recommend that if that is the language that is acceptable to the maker, at some point you reopen the hearing for the sole purpose of asking the applicant if he would accept that language.
I will do that, but before that, there was some discussion about adding in keeping the current mature landscaping maintained. Is that part of that?
I don't know if the city attorney are we allowed to impose a condition for the applicant to maintain the existing landscaping?
I think
in addition to
the landscaping I was talking about was
landscaping?
something that's in the front, that's the property owner's property requirement.
Okay, never mind then. That makes sense. Okay, so I should reopen the...
Well, I actually thought he actually agreed to that condition, but I think
too.
just to be safe and to be clear for the record.
So now that we have exact wording, maybe you could please come up and give us whether you would approve that or not.
Madam Chair, again, just technical, could you please just reopen the hearing for the specific
Okay, I am going to reopen the hearing at this time.
Hi again, John Halminski here on behalf of Verizon. We accept those conditions as added.
Thank you. And now I will close the meeting, the hearing. Okay. And if there's no other discussion, you need to press your button. There you go, so we can have a vote. Okay, thank you. Can you do the vote for us, please?
It did not show up on mine, but I vote yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
There is an appeal period. Any aggrieved party who wishes to appeal the Planning Commission's decision may do so by filing an appeal with the Community Development Department within 10 days. Thank you for your time, everybody. At this time, we'll be taking a 10-minute break. Thank you. We are returning to our meeting. And at this time, would the secretary please call the next item?
Item 7C, hearing having been advertised as required by law, is hereby open to consider agenda item 7C, case number MCA 2019-70572, to amend the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code to define biotechnology and similar uses as technology and life sciences, add technology and life sciences to the list of uses allowed within the M1 Industrial Park Zone, and to establish related parking requirements. The location is citywide in the Industrial Park M1 zone, and the applicant is the City of Thousand Oaks.
Thank you. Presenting on behalf of staff is Associate Planner Don Nelson.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Commission, members of the public. The request before you tonight is in order, as Lori had mentioned, is to define biotechnology and similar uses as technology and life sciences, to add that use category to the list of allowed uses within the M1 zone, and to establish related parking requirements for that specific use. This is before the Planning Commission tonight because the Planning Commission is required to review and make a recommendation back to the City Council for any proposed amendments to the Municipal Code. The City Council will eventually take their final action. A little bit of background on this particular item. Back in June, the City Council's Economic Development Ad Hoc Committee indicated support for the consideration of this amendment that's before you tonight. And then in July of this year, the City Council approved the Municipal Code initiation in order to amend it for the biotechnology. So why is this the amendment before us tonight? Particularly, it's like, and when speaking about biotechnology, that sector has evolved rapidly ever since inception, but particularly over the past decade. And the current regulations contained within the municipal code, they are actually inadequate to keep up with the fast-paced evolution of this particular sector. Currently, biotechnology, it's since we don't have a specific classification for it, it's staff uses experimental laboratories or research and development. The problem is that those particular uses are treated exactly the same as plastic and garment manufacturing, as well as tire rebuilding. All of these uses, they tend to be more resource and labor intensive than what a traditional biotechnology company would be. Taking that into consideration, staff had created this new definition. I won't go through and read it, but just so you know, we do have the page number indicated on here where you can find it in the staff report if you wish to go through. Just so that you know, this definition was actually created after reviewing it with 7 different other jurisdictions' definitions for biotechnology or the use classification that biotechnology would fall under. And ultimately, this is what staff was able to come up with. Now, this proposed definition, it really focuses on that advanced technology aspect that we're currently missing within the municipal code itself. And it can be differentiated from your basic research and design, for industrial research and design, because it has that focus on that advanced technology. And a lot of your biotech companies, they use innovative technologies such as these advanced robotics and 3D printing. Now, the reason why these particular innovative technologies are not contained within the actual definition is because most of those technological advancements only happened within the past 10 to 20 years. And we don't want to constrain the city's definition for this new, for biotechnology before we even formally adopt or potentially adopt this use definition. So we don't want to become obsolete before we approve anything. Now, taking a look at that particular definition, biotechnology, it does tend to be more of that light industrial use, since it's more of the offices and some of these, the laboratories. Given that aspect, the proper zoning that staff was able to identify was the M1, the industrial park zone, because it does match the intent of the M1 zone, which is to offer a location for this light industrial use. Staff did initially think about including the M2 zone, but that was ultimately pulled back because the M2 is meant more for your general industrial uses, which are more resource intensive uses than what a biotechnology would be. And just to kind of show you where the M1 zone would be located, so here you can see in the purple, those are the M1 zones that are officially designated within the city. And so that's where this biotechnology use would be limited at. Now that we've identified the zone, it's how does it go through the permitting process? As I'd mentioned before, we currently classify biotechnology as research and development. Under the current regulations, if a biotech company wants to go in, but they are located within 400 feet of residential use, it triggers a special use permit and a planning commission review. If it's located further than 400 feet away, then it's a development permit plus administrative review. Right now, the city is proposing to change that permitting process under the technology and life sciences for just a requirement of a development permit process. And this is really because the city's recognizing that this biotechnology use, it does not typically does not generate the excessive nuisances that are usually associated with your traditional industrial research and development. And those can include smells, noise, vibrations, particulate creation. And here's just what you would actually see as contained within the municipal code for that delineation between the two different uses. Moving forward, since there's the creation of the new use in order to directly address this the biotechnology sector, there's also we also have to address the parking requirements for that. Under the current standards for research and development, it actually requires a significant amount of parking because it's 1 space per 300 square feet of gross floor area. And then in addition, you have to provide 1 space for every fleet vehicle. And then on top of all of that, you have to provide 1 space for any office space, or 1 space per 250 square feet of gross office space. If the company is located within the Rancho Conejo specific or industrial park specific plan, SP15, technically the requirements are a little less because it takes out that fleet vehicle requirement. However, the verbiage of it effectively kind of puts it back in because you have to, if you have any fleet vehicles, you have to prove that your site contains enough on-site parking to accommodate all of those fleet vehicles. So it's really not lessening the requirements. And really what's kind of getting at with the current requirements is that they are not taking into account, they're effectively requiring double parking of a building, whether it's existing or it's proposed. Particularly for a biotech use. So what happens in the sector is that you will have an office that a researcher will be working at, and then they will have a correlating lab space that will be vacant when they're in the office and vice versa. But under the current existing regulations, we're requiring that they park both areas even though 1 space would be vacant. So taking that into consideration, looking at the parking and taking that into consideration, staff then went and reviewed 7 other jurisdictions, primarily within the county, but also at other major biotechnology hubs. And what we found out was that the parking requirements range from a half a space to 3 1/3 spaces per 1,000 square feet. One of the key differences, though, between these 7 jurisdictions and the city of Thousand Oaks is that they all allowed for netting out particular areas of a building. Taking all of this into consideration and using the experience, the knowledge we learned from the other jurisdictions, staff is recommending 2 new sections to the parking requirements of the municipal code. So the first section is the generation or the required number of parking spaces for the biotechnology use. It would be 1 space per 500 square feet of net area, and I'll get to the net in just a second. And then the second part to that is that 20% of the occupant's gross area can actually be used for office. However, as soon as they go over that 20%, that office space is then the entire office space has to be parked at 1 space per 300 square feet of net floor area. And the reason why there's that change for the 20% is because as soon as you go over 20%, it's really starting to change the actual use of the site. And so if you're having more office space, it'll become more of a parking intensive use. And so that's that requirement. Staff, we did go through and look at existing buildings and some proposed industrial buildings. And we actually did the calculation of proposed office space versus the industrial space. And none of the existing and proposed buildings even came close to the 20%. So just so that for your information. This is the second part of the new creation as well. This is where it's really getting at netting out particular areas. And so we can try and avoid doing that the double parking. And it's really focusing on no off-street parking spaces required for areas that are exclusively used for and maintained as interior common areas. The one edit, this was a typo that ended up in the staff report and the draft ordinance. It was inserted in there as used for. Staff is requesting that the Planning Commission change out used for such as, because all the uses listed after that, they are the examples. Again, because this is an ever-evolving sector, and not only the biotechnology, but also just the technology sector in general. So it's like you have the corridors, conference rooms, also these employee area only, so your lunchrooms, your workout rooms. These spaces are designed just to be utilized by the occupants of the building itself, and they're not inducing additional parking demand. And so therefore, those spaces should not be parked at the same rate or should not be considered into the parking calculations because they're already being utilized by the existing population contained within the building. And this is also consistent with the other jurisdictions that staff reviewed. So I know that's a lot of words and a lot of text, or a lot of numbers there. So just kind of giving you a brief example. We take a fictitious 100,000 square foot building. Say 8,000 square feet of that is going to be office space, and the rest is going to be your general industrial area. And say the building, the company that's going in there will have 300 employees. Under the existing standards, a biotechnology use would require 216 parking spaces. However, under the proposed parking standards, it would only trigger 180 spaces. This is getting really important, particularly when we start factoring in the actual cost of providing parking for a site. So that reduction of 36 spaces amounts to a very significant monetary savings that could really encourage and enable investment of these particular uses within the city of Thousand Oaks. Now, that also directly relates to actually implementing the general plan. This specific goal directs the city to find ways to enable new industrial development to occur within the city. And it also directly relates to these particular policies, which direct the city to encourage these lighter industrial uses to be located within the city, specifically in the Rancho Conejo and the Westlake industrial areas. Overall, though, this entire municipal code amendment for the biotechnology use, it does meet its priority number 9 of the City Council's top 10 priorities for this fiscal year, again, because it's dealing directly with the biotech sector, as well as it meets City Council's goal H for focusing on the biotech, on getting biotech and high technology jobs located within the city. Now, this entire process, the municipal code amendment, is exempt from CEQA under section 15061 because it's, in staff's opinion, it cannot be seen, we are certain that this particular process would not create an adverse environmental impact. So staff recommends the Planning Commission make a recommendation to City Council to 1, find that the municipal code amendment is exempt from the provisions of CEQA, and 2, to approve the amendments to Chapter 4 of Title 9 of the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code as contained within the staff report, the resolution, and the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any? Commissioner Newman?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Nielsen, for your presentation. Just a few questions here. First is regarding the scope of the zoning change. Most of the focus is on the biotech sector in particular, but the wording in the proposed amendment is something like technology and life sciences. So my question is, what is covered under technology? Would, for example, would a company in my former field of computer networking, would that be part of this new category?
So technically, it would fall under that because we are looking at it's an advanced technology that we are looking at attracting. And just in topical conversations with experts within this particular field, there was the encouragement to make it a broad definition because the biotechnology field and the technology field are evolving so rapidly. We didn't want to exclude ourselves before we even got out of the gate. Great.
Yeah, and I am aware of several both incumbent established companies and startups in the area that are working. Some touch biological fields, some don't. They're just pure tech plays. But I think having tech be part of this would be important. With regard to parking, you've given some good evidence of why this would definitely be less expensive and more attractive for developers and for companies to set up shop here. What about for employees? Is there evidence that the reduced parking, even though we're reducing it, that there's the amount of parking would still be sufficient for the employees?
Yes, and that actually goes back to our studies of the other jurisdictions, and most notably, I'm going to speak from experience with Ventura, since that's the jurisdiction I did come from. They have a much lower parking rate that is very similar to what's being proposed here, and even within those the industrial areas, there is sufficient There's actually still an abundance of parking that's provided on site that takes into account the number of employees for all of that. So that's just from that experience. But then kind of going back to the policy side and the review, this is very consistent with all the other jurisdictions. So we are confident that there is enough parking. In addition, before a company does locate into an existing structure, one aspect that staff actually we are required to review is to ensure that there is sufficient parking existing on site for that use to go into an existing structure.
And if I can add to that answer, what we've also found in talking to these companies in preparation for this ordinance is that they double up on space. So a large portion of the operation involves laboratories and sort of research fields. Those are also the same people that fill the offices. So in preparing for this, we found that there wasn't a need to double count in that particular area because you have a sharing of space amongst existing employees, which reduces the parking need.
And that actually was going to be my follow-up question, and either of you can take this. What I was going to ask was about here in TO. Mr. Nielsen made reference to the doubling up part where you'd have to count the 250 or one spot per 250 square feet on top of the one spot per 300 or 350 or whatever. Has that led in practice to an excess or more parking spaces that are actually needed at the sites that do exist?
Yes, and so right now when we do review our industrial areas, there is a significant amount of parking that is actually underutilized. So effectively what we're getting is that our industrial sites, they're not being utilized to the maximum effect that they can, which does have an economic impact on the city at large.
Okay, thanks. My final question has to do with the environmental review part of this. I mean, this is part one of the two recommendations we're being asked to make. Reading from the staff report, it says that the CEQA review only applies to projects which have the potential for causing a significant effect on the environment. Is it staff's position that biotech has no significant impact on the environment?
So this is the text that's contained within the staff report. It's the exactly actually how it reads as contained in CEQA itself. What's before us tonight, and if you'll pardon me. So really what's before us tonight is the city, we're reviewing existing policy And so right now, biotechnology uses, they are allowed even under our code. And what this municipal code amendment is doing, it's just updating existing city policy to address this particular use itself. There's no direct...
in the actual resolution. I'm asking specifically about point 4. This is let's see, attachment 4, page 3, at the bottom of the page. I was just using the staff report because it was shorthand, but the specific language in the resolution is CEQA only applies to projects which have the potential for causing a significant effect on the environment.
Correct. So in this instance, yes. So this municipal code amendment, it is in staff's opinion that this will not cause an adverse effect on the environment because we're just modifying existing city policy. It is compliant with the general plan, and the general with the general plan goals and policies. Those have already been had their environmental review conducted, and then additionally, any new physical development. So, if a brand new structure were to be constructed, addition, alteration to an existing structure, all of the physical side, they will actually have their own environmental review conducted as part of their process.
If I may, Chair and Commissioner Newman. I see your point. First of all, I did review this as far as because this was a unique project for us to present, and I'm certainly confident with the selection of this section as far as the exemption. I think if you go to page 8 of the staff report, the last page of the staff report, under environmental review, I think Mr. Nielsen did a good job in setting forth like 3 elements. So if you look at each paragraph, it's 3 elements. One of them is that this is a common sense exemption that does fit, and looking at the history of exemptions, this kind of situation does fit it. The second one is it is consistent, and they had in this location, they had previous environmental studies done. But the biggest one, I think, for you and for all of us is that if there's a new project that comes in, that new project is going to be evaluated under CEQA to ensure that if there is something unique about that project, we're going to review it. So that's when we're going to get to. So I think your answer is yes, we are concerned about CEQA when it comes to biotech or any other project. And this third section of this third part of the paragraph under page 8, it certainly talks about the idea that in all cases when we have a project, we're going to do some evaluation. It might be actually that it's also exempt. It just depends. But it might be where it's a minimal type of review. It might be a EIR. I mean, that's just how you do it. So I think that's where we're going with that.
So to clarify that, the meaning of that last paragraph in the staff report, is it the case then that we're saying the amendment itself is CEQA exempt, but that new projects that come in as a result of this amendment that are in this technology and life sciences field may or will be subject to environmental review?
I think for me, to be comfortable to say is that every project that we're going to review, we're automatically going to do what kind of environmental do we need to do on this? And we do it every time when we meet on a project. We say, is this exempt? Is it not exempt? And we actually, my job is to actually ask planners to say, hey, where are you going with this project? Whether it's a single family house, whether it is a facility in the M1 zone, whether it's a big apartment complex, whatever it's going to be, we're going to ask that question. What's the environment analysis done for this case? And again, I would just want to be clear. It might be an exemption. It might be a minimal type of environmental review, or it might be a much more serious review.
So to put you on the spot on this, are we, so you're saying we are not, with this amendment, just exempting a category of industries
We're not
from
exempting
environmental review?
Correct. We're not exempting any project because there's no project before you in that sense.
Okay.
I think in the analysis that
this amendment would not just automatically exempt.
Right. And to be clear, for the record too, Mr. Nielsen is not actually saying it's not a project. He's saying that this project has a common sense exemption, because there's also some recent cases you might have seen about what is a project, what is not a project, and we're not in there. We're actually just going through.
I've been in enough organic chemistry labs to quibble with the common sense part of that. some pretty nasty stuff in those places.
Okay.
But that's neither here nor there, right? We're saying this amendment, it's by itself doesn't just exempt the category. This new we're creating a new category, technology and life sciences, but we're not, with this amendment, exempting them from environmental review. Is that a correct understanding?
Correct. Any new construction, any new project, we're going to do an environmental review.
Thank you. Nothing further. Thank you.
Commissioner Buss.
All right, I got two quick questions. One, I don't know if staff is aware that there was a recent lawsuit between two neighbors in an M1 zone about parking that resulted in a six-figure settlement. So I was curious how that impacts your calculations as far as parking goes, or if you were aware of it when you came up with these numbers. One of them was a public entity and one was a private entity.
I'm not aware specifically, so I can't say that for sure. I do know that there was a public entity that has a property over that location, and there was another neighbor who had concerns about it. I think that was a very unique situation with a lot of different unique issues. I don't think either one of those are biotech, by the way.
But it was about parking. That's the only reason I asked.
Absolutely correct. And I did not know that whether it's resolved is the right word or not, but there was some.
It was settled last week.
Okay, so there was a resolution of some kind.
$325,000.
Okay. Again, I don't have any specifics. So
okay, I was just curious if we're really confident about these numbers. And my follow-up question is actually related to that. The M1 zones that we have within the city, are there any kind of a dedicated public transit hubs in these areas? I mean, we're talking about 300 employees and 216 parking spaces. Obviously, we're either anticipating people are going to be ride sharing that are employees of this hypothetical company, or there's going to be some kind of a public transit method for people to arrive there because they're not going to teleport.
So the city does not have any transit hubs located within this particular area. There is a bus line that does loop around this particular section itself. But to my knowledge, we don't have any other plans beyond that.
And ideally, the parking in the ordinance is to park the use itself, regardless of the transit. So the parking standard that we're proposing is based on the parking that this particular type of use would generate. So it doesn't take into account an exemption that you would include in, say, a shared parking study or something along those lines.
Copy that. Okay, perfect.
But so the city is currently going through the general plan update process, and one aspect of that process is actually looking at transportation. So this kind of is going hand in hand with that process, where if we are concerned about introducing more mass transit within this particular portion of the city, that is something that we can actually address going through the general plan update.
Perfect, great. I just want to make sure that was on everybody's radar. I have a second question, and it would have never occurred to me in a million years, but the part that you didn't read, the last sentence addresses a couple of different exclusions as far as cannabis itself. I was curious how that came up and what the thought process is there.
So that the exclusions of the cannabis is really to ensure that it's just the cannabis is controlled specifically by the existing sections within the municipal code, and so that we don't have any cannabis like a high-tech research and development for cannabis itself going into the areas outside of what's designated or where it's controlled by the existing regulations of the municipal code.
Right, and cannabis uses in general have a dedicated section in our municipal code, so that particular use has already been studied and addressed. So they would follow a different set of regulations, and this particular use category that we're proposing is not intended to address that use, so it's just simply a clarification.
You got it. Yeah, I was thinking because I know there are corporations that manufacture like synthetic versions like Marinol and stuff for cancer patients. Would this impact them, yes or no? Or their research into that?
I think that's a different type of research. And in terms of controlled substances and uses related to cannabis, that would be covered under that municipal code section that Don mentioned in the staff report, under Title 3, Chapter 21, I believe. So this would cover any other type of research that involves life sciences.
Perfect. All right. I'm going to trust you guys on this.
All right. Thank you. Commissioner Lanson?
Keep going with the cannabis discussion. So I'm just going to make it clear. So under this technology and life sciences, cannabis is not included in that type of business, correct?
That's correct.
Does that change the mapping of where cannabis businesses can go in the city?
No.
No.
We certainly have cannabis currently in the M1 zone. I think part of it is we've done. We went to the people and we approved a tax measure for various cannabis uses and cannabis-related activities, or I should say licenses. We certainly have currently allowed two different licenses. One is for retail medical marijuana or medical cannabis dispensary, and the second one is a testing laboratory, one testing laboratory. And as I'm sure you all know, the Bureau recently, under the regulations, have allowed deliveries into our city. So when we did the taxes, we taxed every possible license. We currently ban everything other than those two that I mentioned, and we have to now, which we changed our ordinance, allow the delivery. So we're trying to capture that, and also, as Mr. Nielsen said, try to exclude anything else that could be technically, or we're trying to make sure that cannabis doesn't try to jump into this and say, hey, we don't have to do anything because we don't have to pay the taxes because it's not in here.
So they're excluded by virtue of this exception and ultimately have their own set of rules and regulations that don't overlap.
That is correct.
All right, thank you. That's it.
Do you have any other questions?
I have a question for staff. Is there a waiting list of applicants waiting for this to be codified?
So we do have some interest from potential investors coming into the city that are have expressed interest in the city going through and approving this before they do locate within the city boundaries.
And for this to become codified into municipal code, how long does that process take? It will need to go to city council for approval. Then once it's approved by city council.
Yeah, so what happens is that it'll go to the city council for approval. On the first night, they would do the first reading, and then at the next hearing, they would do the second reading, and then I think it's 30 days after that, it then becomes effective after that hearing.
Great, thank you.
Do we have any other questions of staff? Okay. There are no public comments. Does staff have anything else since we've had our discussion? This is just highly unusual here. Okay, so we will close the public meeting at this time, and I will open up the floor for a motion and/or discussion. Commissioner Newman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm generally supportive of technology and life sciences. They bring many benefits to people everywhere and to life here in Thousand Oaks. So with that, I will propose that we recommend MCA 2019-70572 to the City Council that we forward the following recommendations to the City Council. That one, we find that the Municipal Code Amendment is exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to Section 15061B3 of the CEQA Guidelines, and that we recommend approving amendments to Chapter 4 of Title 9 of the Thousand Oaks Municipal Code.
Thank you.
Based on the findings.
Do you have any discussion? Oh, you need to push your button? All right. All right. Can you have the vote, please?
I vote yes. My system's down.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Item number 8, department reports. We have none. Item number 9, commission comments and AB 1234 reports. Commissioner Newman.
Just very briefly, my wife and I spent a weekend recently up in Carmel, California, and this is a place that has multi-million-dollar bungalows and very high-end stores, galleries, that sort of thing. So I was both surprised and pleased to find right in the middle of downtown there's a big construction project going on for affordable housing. Pretty centrally located. It's a mixed-use project. It has 3 retail units. It has 4 market rate condos. It has 2 medium medium income apartments and 2 low income apartments. So there's a 50-50 split of market rate and affordable housing in the middle of Carmel. I was surprised to find it there, but also pleased to see that kind of development is possible.
Thank you. Do you have any other commission comments? Okay. It's late. Staff update, item 10. Do we have anything?
No updates or announcements this evening, other than there will be a general plan advisory committee meeting taking place this Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. in the Oak and Park Room. And we do have planning commission meetings scheduled to come up, so we're pretty much back on our regular schedule of biweekly meetings.
All right, thank you. At this point, I want to thank you all, and the meeting is now adjourned to the next meeting, September 9th, 2019 at 6 p.m.